Chapter 2699. The three major beast soldiers. At the front of the palace stood three stone statues of beast soldiers. Each stone statue was extremely majestic and lifelike. In front of each of the three beast soldiers stood a leader. The leader on the right held the green dragon crescent blade and wore a green robe. Although he had a human body, he stood with a green dragon head. The leader in the middle was a charming woman wearing a loose cheongsam. Although her expression looked a little stiff, she still had a soul-stirring charm. The strange thing was that this woman had 9 furry tails behind her. She should be a 9-tailed fox. The leader on the left was a giant toad. However, this toad stood up and held a sharp sword that was about to be unsheathed. This appearance looked quite strange. Crack. Suddenly, the stone statues of the three leaders made a cracking sound. Then, the stones on the surface of the three leaders, which were supposed to be stone statues, peeled off one by one, revealing their real bodies. It seems that someone has collected all 3 spacetime keys. The dragon-headed person holding the green dragon crescent blade said lightly, "Hey, you really made us wait for a long time. It wasn't easy for us to enter the spacetime domain. After searching for countless years, we finally found the spacetime temple. Unfortunately, without the spacetime key, we couldn't enter. Today, someone finally gathered the spacetime key and sent it to us." The 9-tailed fox pursed her lips and smiled. The 9 furry tails behind her swayed gently with a soul-stirring beauty. "Croak. We have an agreement. After obtaining the spacetime key, the 3 of us will enter the spacetime temple together. If anyone dares to break the agreement, they will be struck by lightning," the toad said coldly. Among the 3 of them, Toad was the least scheming. He also knew that 9-tailed fox and the dragon-headed man were both very meticulous. If he were to compete with them in terms of scheming, he would simply be looking for trouble. Therefore, he had already made things clear before this. "Don't worry, Toad. Since we have made an agreement, we will naturally fulfill it," the 9-tailed fox said with a charming smile. The toad snorted and immediately stomped his foot. Suddenly, the 50 stone statues behind him cracked and 50 beast soldiers appeared. These 50 beast soldiers all knelt on one knee to show their respect and submission to the toad. "That human is very fast. He's already here." The 9-tailed fox giggled. With a light tap of her jade-like hand, the 50 beast soldiers behind her also broke out of their shells. The dragon-headed person was not careless. Naturally, he also awakened the beast soldiers that belonged to him. When the 3 beast soldiers were completely awakened, a streak of light shot over and stopped not far from the temporal temple. Zhuoan raised his head and looked at the faintly discernible temple in the mist. A look of joy appeared in his eyes. He knew that the temple in front of him should be the spacetime temple that he had been searching for. But soon, his attention was attracted by the 3 beast soldiers in front of the temple. In particular, the 3 leaders in front of the 3 beast soldiers all had vast auras. They were all peak Hunyuan Lord, and their strength couldn't be underestimated. "Are you the guardians of the temporal temple?" Zhuoan asked indifferently. The 9-tailed fox blinked her right eye and giggled. "Cute little brother, you may have misunderstood. We are not the guardians of the temple. We want to enter the temple. If little brother is willing to hand over the spacetime temple, we will be very grateful and won't make things difficult for you." The dragon-headed person and the toad both remained calm and looked at Zhuoan. Although Zhuoan's aura was only at the extreme realm of life and death, they knew about the commotion he had caused in front of them and knew that he was not weak. However, the 3 of them were not afraid of him. After all, they were all peak Hunyuan Lord and could be considered as real experts. No matter how strong Zhuoan was, how could he be stronger than the 3 of them? Therefore, they wanted Zhuoan to take the initiative to hand over the 3 temporal keys. Zhuoan sneered and ignored the 9-tailed fox's words. Instead, he said indifferently, "If you don't want to die, you'd better get out of the way. Otherwise, I won't be merciful." The 9-tailed fox was stunned. She looked at Zhuoan in disbelief. She had thought of many possibilities, but most of them were scenes of him begging for mercy or negotiating. She didn't expect him to be indifferent and even speak rudely as if he wasn't afraid of them. The dragon-headed person and the toad also looked gloomy. They felt that the human in front of them was too arrogant. "We've been tolerant enough, but you didn't take advantage of this opportunity. Since you insist on courting death, I'll fulfill your wish." The dragon-headed person's temper was obviously more irritable. He roared and took a step forward, sweeping in front of Zhuowen as if he had teleported. Immediately, the green dragon crescent blade in his hand turned into a terrifying blade light and slashed down, wanting to cut Zhuowen in two. With a wave of his sleeve, Zhuowen summoned the death sacrifice sword and blocked in front of him. With a crisp clang, the death sacrifice sword collided with the green dragon crescent blade. The terrifying shockwave spread out, forming a ring of gas that spread out. It looked extremely terrifying. Zhuowen took a few steps back and looked at the green dragon crescent blade in the dragon-headed person's hand. He knew that the green dragon crescent blade of the dragon-headed person was much more advanced than the death sacrifice sword. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been able to suppress the death sacrifice sword at first contact. The dragon-headed person roared and rushed forward. The moment Zhuowen took a step back, the green dragon crescent blade in his hand turned into a sharp blade light, pouring down like rain in front of Zhuowen. Zhuowen held the death sacrifice sword in his left hand and clenched his right hand into a fist. The power of the 3 stars Pangu sacred body suddenly erupted and slammed forward. Is this guy crazy? How can he block the blade with his bare hands? The 9-tailed fox and the toad looked at Zhuowen's action with strange expressions. The dragon-headed person's green dragon crescent blade was an origin-level divine artifact. Even the two of them didn't dare to block it with their bare hands. However, this human, who was obviously at a disadvantage, did so. Wasn't he looking for death? Bang! But soon, they were shocked to find that the human's fist hit the green dragon crescent blade and deflected it. Then, the death sacrifice sword in the human's left hand accurately pierced the dragon-headed person's chest. Fart! The dragon-headed person screamed and immediately gave up on the green dragon crescent blade. He used an escape technique and immediately left Zhuowen's place, landing where the 9-tailed fox and the toad were. How can this guy's physical body be so terrifying? The dragon-headed person kept coughing up blood. The terrifying death aura of the death sacrifice sword poured into his body, constantly devouring his vitality. It was extremely difficult to deal with. Fortunately, the death sacrifice sword's level was not high. Although his vital parts were injured by the death sacrifice sword, it was not fatal. The 9-tailed fox and the toad were also shocked. The way they looked at Zhuowen became more dignified. It seemed that they had underestimated the human in front of them. Zhuowen looked at the dragon-headed person who was still alive in surprise and immediately put away the death sacrifice sword. He knew that the reason he couldn't kill the dragon-headed person with one blow was that the death sacrifice sword's level was too low. After all, the death sacrifice sword was only a heavenly path divine artifact, while the dragon-headed person was at the peak of origin master. The difference between the two was not small. Chapter 2700. Entering the Spacetime Temple. You two, are you still planning to watch the show? This person is not simple. Let's kill him together, the dragon-headed person said to the toad and the 9-tailed fox. At the same time, he roared and the beast soldiers behind him rushed out in an orderly manner towards Zhuowen. The 9-tailed fox and the toad also knew that the current situation was critical. They summoned the beast soldiers behind them to join the dragon-headed person's beast soldiers and encircled Zhuowen. The 9-tailed fox and the toad were naturally not watching the show. Instead, they followed behind the beast soldiers and looked for the best opportunity to attack. The dragon-headed person sat cross-legged on the spot and coughed up blood continuously. He was stabbed in his vital parts. Although he did not die, he was seriously injured. He knew that he would be courting death if he joined the battle. Therefore, he planned to recover from his injuries first and let the 9-tailed fox and the toad delay the human. However, what happened next shocked the dragon-headed man. He discovered that Zhuowen seemed to be overturning the seas when the 3 combined beast soldiers attacked him. It was as if Zhuowen had entered an unstoppable state. Then, the dragon-headed person was shocked to find that the human was surrounded by the 3 beast soldiers. Every time he attacked, he would definitely take away the life of a beast soldier. One must know that the strength of each of the three beast soldiers was at least the heavenly Tao master. However, they were all killed so cleanly by this person. Bang bang bang. Zhuowen threw out punch after punch. Every punch formed a fist mark that was branded in the void. The speed of his punches was too fast. In just an instant, he blasted out 150 fist marks. These fist marks overlapped in the starry sky as if they were thrown out at the same time. The aura was vast and earth-shattering. The three beast soldiers were also blasted away by the fist marks at this moment. In the process of flying back, every beast soldier's body collapsed and was annihilated. In just an instant, only the toad and the nine-tailed fox were left on the battlefield. They stood still not far away and looked dumbfoundedly at the figure that was like a god or a demon lying across the void. The toad and the nine-tailed fox had been following behind. They did not even reach the scene when the battle between the beast soldiers was over. In the span of a single breath, that human had completely annihilated the three beast armies they commanded. They were unable to imagine what sort of strength was required to reach such a terrifying level. This person must be an expert at the second step of Tao validation. We can't fight against him. Retreat. Nine-tailed fox made a prompt decision and immediately retreated, but Toad was slower by a beat. By the time he reacted, Zhuowen had arrived, landed in front of Toad, and smashed a punch at him. The Toad's heart was filled with fear. With a loud shout, he unsheathed the divine sword in his hand and slashed out. It was as if the sky had collapsed. Unfortunately, this powerful sword was still shattered by the young man in front of him with a single punch. Let's fight. The Toad felt an unprecedented crisis. Without thinking, he spat out a mouthful of essence blood and quickly formed a seal that landed on the divine sword in his hand. Then, dense Buddhist runes appeared on the surface of the divine sword. Moreover, these Buddhist runes contained a powerful force. Then, these Buddhist runes condensed into a giant glazed sword. It broke through the air and swept toward Zhuowen. Zhuowen's eyes were solemn. He felt that this was a desperate move from Toad. Its power was terrifying, so he had to use all his strength. When Zhuowen's fist hit the glazed sword, he found that a trace of blood appeared on his fist. This glazed sword had actually slightly injured his Pangu sacred body. It was indeed extraordinary. Zhuowen was no longer careless. His right hand formed a claw and clasped the tip of the glazed sword. Then, he immediately used the profound meaning to open the sky blade. A mysterious light covered the surface of Zhuowen's palm blade. Then, Zhuowen gently rotated his palm blade and chopped the glazed sword, completely shattering it. Zhuowen's palm blade did not lose its momentum and fell on Toad. Under Toad's fearful gaze, Toad was easily chopped into pieces. Seeing this, Nine-tailed Fox could not help but scream. She had completely lost the will to fight. Her 9 tails swayed and like a bolt of lightning, she shot into the distance. She had fled without fighting. Zhuowen just looked indifferently in the direction that Nine-tailed Fox had fled. He did not chase after her. She had a way to escape. If he were to chase after her, he was afraid that he would have to go through a lot of trouble. He did not want to waste time on this. The dragon-headed man sat cross-legged on the side and watched Zhuowen easily kill many beast soldiers. He felt bitter and his body stiffened. "Sir, I was blind and offended you. I hope you won't kill me." The dragon-headed man lowered his head and submitted to Zhuowen. Zhuowen gladly accepted. He did not intend to kill the dragon-headed man. Instead, he looked at the space-time temple in front of him and said, "How much do you know about the space-time temple?" The dragon-headed man was delighted and eagerly introduced the space-time temple's origin. Since the human in front of him had asked him about the space-time temple, it meant that the human did not intend to kill him. He might be able to fight for a chance of survival, so he was particularly enthusiastic in his introduction. After listening to the dragon-headed man's introduction, Zhuowen also had a preliminary understanding of the space-time temple. It turned out that the owner of the space-time temple was a space-time beast. It was said that the space-time beast had a trace of the candle dragon's bloodline. It was also one of the top 10 races in the primitive heaven domain. However, the space-time beast race was different from the sorcerer race. They had very few members, much fewer than the devouring race. They rarely appeared in the world. However, once the space-time beast race appeared, it would definitely alarm the primitive heaven domain. This was because any expert from the space-time beast race was definitely a top expert. The space-time temple was obviously left behind by one of the space-time beasts. Of course, the dragon-headed man did not know what was in the space-time temple. However, he knew that the space-time beast race's cave was definitely extremely rich. This was because the space-time beast race was born with the ability to control space-time. They could distort space-time and avoid all kinds of dangers. They were especially suitable for treasure hunting. The space-time beast race's character was also the kind of race that liked treasure hunting. They liked to travel around the starry sky and hide the treasures they collected in their cave as a collection. It could be said that being able to find a space-time beast race's cave was a huge treasure for anyone. Zhuowen nodded and let the dragon-headed man go. He landed in front of the space-time temple's main hall and took out the 3 space-time keys. There were indeed 3 keyholes at the main entrance of the temple, which should correspond to the 3 space-time temple keys. After Zhuowen inserted the 3 space-time keys into the keyholes, the huge temple door set off a terrifying space-time storm. Zhuowen operated the space-time rules and barely avoided being swept away by the space-time storm. He watched the huge temple door slowly open in front of him. Just as Zhuowen wanted to see what was inside the temple door, a terrifying space-time suction force appeared. Zhuowen was not careful and was sucked in. Chapter 2701. Puzzlement. Zhuowen opened his eyes and examined everything in the hall. He discovered that the space-time energy in the hall was even more terrifying. In front of Zhuowen's eyes, it was clearly just a hall, but Zhuowen felt like it was infinitely large. He could not see the edges of the hall. Zhuowen carefully walked forward. Since the outside world was filled with danger, the inside of the temporal temple would definitely be even more dangerous. However, to Zhuowen's surprise, he did not encounter any other dangers along the way. Aside from the powerful space-time energy that made him uncomfortable, he did not encounter any other dangers. Speaking of which, the hall was very spacious. There were hundreds of huge stone pillars in the hall, and at the very front was an altar. Apart from that, there was nothing else in the temporal temple. Zhuowen did not even see any secret doors or rooms. Zhuowen looked at the spacious hall in surprise. In his impression, the temporal temple should have many resources, at least piled up like a mountain. Moreover, the dragon-headed person had said that the temporal temple was the dwelling of the space-time beasts, and the space-time beasts loved to collect treasures. Why was there nothing in the temporal temple? Zhuowen's gaze fell on the altar at the very front. He saw that the altar was also empty. However, at the center of the altar, there was a dark blue ball of light floating about. This dark blue ball of light emitted a mysterious aura that attracted Zhuowen. He could not help but want to approach it and investigate it. Zhuowen hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he followed the carpet and walked towards the altar at the end. Zhuowen became even more careful. He was deeply afraid that he would encounter some unknown danger while walking on the carpet. However, when Zhuowen finally arrived in front of the altar, there was no danger like Zhuowen had imagined. This made Zhuowen sigh in relief. Just what is this thing? Zhuowen looked at the blue ball of light floating in front of him. He discovered that the space-time power contained within the ball of light was extremely terrifying. It was like a lot of space-time power had been compressed together. Zhuowen could not help but feel deep fear. It could be said that this blue light cluster was a ticking time bomb. It was the first time that Zhuowen had encountered such a terrifying compressed space-time power. If this thing exploded, even if he had the 3-star Pangu sacred body, he would probably be blown to pieces. However, Zhuowen discovered that the blue light was similar to the space-time heart. The space-time heart was the core energy of the space-time roulette. The space-time roulette relied on the space-time heart to travel through space-time at extreme speeds. Why don't we try using the space-time roulette? Zhuowen muttered to himself. Unable to suppress the impulse in his heart, he took out the space-time roulette. Immediately afterward, after he took out the space-time roulette, the blue light cluster had some strange movements. Then, The blue light cluster approached the spacetime roulette and directly entered the spacetime roulette. Immediately, Zhuowen discovered that the spacetime roulette was wrapped in the blue light cluster. Zhuowen's consciousness could clearly feel that the spacetime power in the blue light cluster was continuously pouring into the spacetime roulette. The spacetime roulette's aura was constantly skyrocketing. Zhuowen knew that the spacetime roulette was transforming. Zhuowen waited for 3 days. Finally, the blue light cluster was absorbed by the spacetime roulette. Zhuowen looked at the spacetime roulette in front of him. He found that the spacetime roulette's appearance had not changed at all, but its aura had undergone a tremendous change. Zhuowen was sure that if he drove the spacetime roulette again, the speed of the spacetime roulette would definitely be dozens or even hundreds of times faster than before. There was no doubt about that. The moment Zhuowen touched the spacetime roulette, he discovered that an image of a large hall had appeared in his mind. The image analyzed every corner of the hall, and it was extremely complete. Moreover, he faintly felt that he seemed to have control over the spacetime temple. Could it be that the blue light cluster just now was the central hub of the spacetime temple? Because I refined the central hub, I gained control of the spacetime temple? Zhuowen was surprised, but more than that, he was puzzled. It seemed that he had not done anything, and the blue light cluster had run over and merged into the spacetime roulette. Then, he inexplicably gained control of the spacetime temple. Zhuowen was somewhat baffled by this free lunch that had fallen from the sky. However, he was more vigilant. He never believed that there was a free lunch in the world. The fact that he had refined the central hub of the spacetime temple too easily was an extremely strange thing. Although he felt that this matter was not simple, he still carefully examined the map of the large hall that had appeared in his mind. He discovered that there was a secret passage under the altar. Entering this secret passage seemed to lead to the storage cellar of the spacetime temple. The master of the spacetime temple should have hidden everything in this cellar. Then, let's go in and take a look. Zhuowen muttered to himself. He opened the secret passage, entered it with a whoosh, and disappeared inside. Before long, Zhuowen arrived in front of the cellar. Following the instructions in his mind, he opened the door to the cellar. Then, a look of shock appeared on his face. This was because the cellar of the spacetime temple was filled with all kinds of resources. The cellar was very large, about the size of 2 football fields. However, it was filled with resources. This shocked Zhuowen. He saw a mountain of heavenly law origin crystals inside. Moreover, they were all special-grade heavenly law origin crystals. After all, these special-grade heavenly law origin crystals had all been purified. Although the mountain of special-grade heavenly law origin crystals might not be as large as the special-grade heavenly law origin crystal vein Zhuowen had obtained from the origin grounds, their quality might surpass the special-grade heavenly law origin crystal vein that Zhuowen had obtained. After all, although the vein Zhuowen had obtained last time was enormous, if it was truly purified into crystals, it might not necessarily be as large as the pair of white special-grade heavenly law origin crystals in front of Zhuowen. Apart from the special-grade heavenly law origin crystals, there were many precious divine medicines in the cellar, as well as various rare ores used for forging weapons. There were also various divine artifacts of the Tao. It could be said that the amount of resources in the cellar was definitely the most plentiful that Zhuowen had seen so far. It was also the most varied. There are so many forging materials. Kid, leave these forging materials to me. With these precious forging materials, I think the Blood Immortal and I will be able to evolve again. Xiao Hei swept out with the Thunderfire sword. Her eyes shone as she stared at the piles of forging materials in the cellar. Zhuowen nodded. He summoned the Blood Immortal and Sacrificial Death and said, Xiao Hei, refine the Sacrificial Death as well. Xiao Hei was an artifact cultivator. Her attainments in forging were extremely profound. As long as she had enough forging materials, Xiao Hei could basically constantly evolve. Chapter 2702. A surprising breakthrough. Xiao Hei nodded repeatedly. Then, with the Blood Immortal sword and the Sacrificial Death sword in hand, he pounced on the pile of refining materials with glowing eyes as he clicked his tongue in wonder. Zhuowen, on the other hand, swept everything in the cellar into his small world like a whirlwind, leaving nothing behind. Kid. I might need to stay here for a while. I need to refine these refining materials for my own advancement, Xiao Hei suddenly said to Zhuowen. Zhuowen nodded in agreement. Now that he had obtained so many resources, he also planned to cultivate in seclusion. Since he had obtained so many special-grade heavenly law origin crystals, he naturally wanted to continue cultivating the Pangu sacred body. He hoped to improve it further. Zhuowen's doppelganger separated from his original body and sat cross-legged on one side. Using the power of devouring, it began to absorb the special-grade heavenly law origin crystals in the pocket world like a whale sucking in water. His original body sat cross-legged not far from his doppelganger, slowly absorbing the remnant energy emitted by his doppelganger while comprehending his own heavenly law. Zhuowen could feel that his original body was not far away from completely comprehending the heavenly law. Moreover, with the assistance of the special-grade heavenly law origin crystals, his original body's cultivation would naturally be like a tiger that had grown wings. After half a month, his original body suddenly opened his eyes. At this moment, his aura began to skyrocket at an extremely fast speed, like a sharp arrow piercing through the clouds. Soon, his original body broke through and became a half-step heavenly law master. The doppelganger seemed to have sensed it. Looking at his original body's skyrocketing aura, he knew that his original body was about to break through. A breakthrough naturally required a huge supply of energy, and the special-grade heavenly law origin crystals were naturally the best choice. The doppelganger flicked his finger, and a devouring vortex appeared between his original body's eyebrows. Then, waves of energy from the heavenly law origin crystals surged out like a tide and rushed into the depths of his original body's eyebrows. After that, the aura of his main body skyrocketed once more, rising from the level of a half-step heavenly Tao master. Zhuowen could clearly sense that the shackles on his body seemed to have cracked as his aura skyrocketed, and it seemed like they would shatter at any moment. Zhuowen knew that this shackle was the last barrier he had to overcome to come into contact with the heavenly Tao. Moreover, Zhuowen discovered that this shackle was extremely powerful and terrifying. He had tried to break through it dozens of times, but all of them ended in failure. Zhuowen's stubbornness flared up. He began to channel even more of his devouring power, desperately absorbing the energy of the special-grade heavenly Tao origin crystal. He wanted to break through this shackle in one go. If the cultivators of the Xianmi heavenly domain saw that Zhuowen had not only used a special-grade heavenly Tao origin crystal to break through to heavenly Tao Lord, but also failed to break through after so many attempts, they would definitely curse him for being a wastrel. This was because there was a saying in the Xianmi heavenly domain that the stronger a cultivator's Tao root, the easier it would be for them to break through to the heavenly Tao Lord realm. Supposedly, cultivators that possessed heaven-grade Tao roots would be able to break through to the heavenly Tao Lord realm on their own even if they didn't rely on any heavenly Tao origin crystals. Only those cultivators with extremely weak Tao roots would have to rely on the energy of the outside world to break through their shackles. However, even the weakest Tao root would be sufficient to break through to the heavenly Tao Lord realm by utilizing a certain amount of low-grade heavenly Tao origin crystals. On the other hand, Zhuowen had relied on a special-grade heavenly Tao origin crystal to break through. Moreover, he tried to break through a few tens of times, so all the cultivators of the Xianmi heavenly domain knew that this person was probably a fellow that didn't possess a natural talent in Tao roots. Moreover, there would even be people that would curse him for wasting God's given gifts. He clearly didn't possess a Tao root, yet he'd actually acted so recklessly and utilized a large amount of special-grade heavenly Tao origin crystals to break through by force. Was he courting death? Zhuowen didn't know all of this, and he wasn't even sure if he possessed a Tao root. He'd thought that others would break through to the heavenly Tao Lord realm in the same manner as him, and he'd even muttered about how difficult it was to break through to the heavenly Tao Lord realm. However, he quickly realized that something was wrong. After all, he possessed so many special-grade heavenly Tao origin crystals. How could an ordinary cultivator of the Xianmi heavenly domain possess so many special-grade heavenly Tao origin crystals to break through to the heavenly Tao Lord realm? It would already be very good if they possessed low-grade heavenly Tao origin crystals. Since they'd all successfully broken through to the heavenly Tao Lord realm, then why hadn't he broken through after absorbing so many special-grade heavenly Tao origin crystals? However, the arrow was already narked on the bow, and he had no choice but to release it. Zhuowen had no choice but to continue absorbing special-grade Heavenly Tao Origin crystals to break through to the Heavenly Tao Lord realm with all his strength. His clone also stopped absorbing special-grade Heavenly Tao Origin crystals and looked at his main body in shock. His main body was absorbing special-grade Heavenly Tao Origin crystals at a speed that was countless times faster than his clone. His clone realized that something was wrong when he saw the small mountain of special-grade Heavenly Tao Origin crystals in the small world continuously decreasing, and he couldn't help but stand up. After absorbing the special-grade Heavenly Tao Origin crystals for half a month, the third flame star between his clone's eyebrows had finally become much brighter. It was no longer as dim as it was at the beginning. Obviously, his clone's Pangu sacred body had also made some progress in the past half a month and had broken through to the middle 3-star level. His clone had originally estimated that if he absorbed a portion of the special-grade Heavenly Tao Origin crystals, his Pangu sacred body should have no problem breaking through to the peak 3-star level. However, now that something had happened to his main body, his clone naturally couldn't continue absorbing special-grade Heavenly Tao Origin crystals. Instead, he looked at his clone worriedly. His main body's forehead was covered in cold sweat. Although his heart ached when he saw the special-grade Heavenly Tao Origin crystals continuously decreasing, his stubbornness also rose. His main body roared angrily, and his devouring power swept away all the special-grade Heavenly Tao Origin crystals in the small world and poured them all into his body. He planned to stake everything on this one throw and give it his all. This time, he must break through to the Heavenly Tao Lord realm. Crack! Finally, the moment the last bit of energy poured into Zhuowen's body, Zhuowen seemed to hear the sound of the shackles in his body shattering. In the end, he discovered that the shackles were collapsing. Zhuowen let out a long roar, and the aura in his body rose to the extreme. At the same time, he felt that he had complete control over the Heavenly Tao rules around him. However, Zhuowen discovered that the meridians in his body didn't seem to have transformed into Tao meridians. The only change was that after the illusory sky bridge shattered, it entered his dantian and formed a black vortex. This black vortex was like a black hole in the starry sky, deep and endless. Zhuowen had already learned a little about the Heavenly Tao Lord from Fire Plume. He knew that the meridians in the body of a Tao validation cultivator would transform into Tao meridians the moment they broke through. The so-called Tao meridians were naturally meridians that had been transformed by Tao runes into more powerful meridians. They could use the power of the Heavenly Tao rules at will. Chapter 2703. Killing intent targeted at Kong Shezhuowen could sense that after his main body became the Heavenly Tao Master, his strength was no weaker than an ordinary master of primordial chaos. It was a very strange feeling. Zhuowen realized that there was something wrong with his breakthrough because the situation after his breakthrough was very different from what Fire Plume had described. Although he was very puzzled and wanted to know what was going on, he knew that now was not the time to ask. After all, he did not have a cultivator from the Xian Mi heavenly domain like Fire Plume by his side to explain it to him. Zhuowen guessed that the reason for this was very likely to have something to do with his Tao root. After he went to the Xian Mi heavenly domain this time, he was indeed going to test his Tao root. He was also looking forward to the grade of his Tao root. Breaking through to the Heavenly Tao Master consumed so many special-grade Heavenly Tao Origin crystals. This, after discovering that 2/3 of the special-grade Heavenly Tao Origin crystals in the small world had been consumed, Zhuowen was speechless and felt that it was unbelievable. After all, the Heavenly Tao Master was only the first minor realm of the first step of Tao validation. He actually needed so many special-grade Heavenly Tao Origin crystals to break through. He could not imagine how terrifying the resources he would need if he continued to break through in the future. It could be said that his main body was even more terrifying than the clone's Pangu sacred body. What Zhuowen didn't know was that the reason he needed so many special-grade Heavenly Tao Origin crystals was mainly because he didn't have an ancestral Tao root, or perhaps his ancestral Tao root was extremely inferior. So, he needed even more energy to break through. Just think about it, who would have so many special-grade Heavenly Tao Origin crystals when breaking through to the Heavenly Tao Master? Even if they had so many special-grade Heavenly Dao origin crystals, ordinary cultivators would give up after failing to break through a few times because they knew that it was simply a waste of effort. However, Zhuowen did not understand this. He broke through to the Heavenly Dao Master hundreds of times and consumed most of the special-grade Heavenly Dao origin crystals in the small mountain before he finally broke through. Of course, after breaking through, Zhuowen also discovered that his strength was much stronger than ordinary Heavenly Dao Masters. His strength was comparable to that of Master of Primordial Chaos, which was a great gain. Brat, the commotion caused by your breakthrough is too big. I was almost scared to death by you. Xiao Hei brought the Blood Immortal Sword and the sacrificial death sword to Zhuowen. She looked at him with a strange look. Zhuowen scratched his head and changed the topic. You've already refined those materials? However, Xiao Hei shook her head and said, it's not that simple. I've only started refining it. If I want to use these materials to evolve, it will take some time. Let's go into your small world first. I plan to go into seclusion for a while. With so many materials, I think I can try to break through to the second step of Dao confirmation. Zhuowen did not doubt Xiao Hei's words. After putting Xiao Hei and the others into his small world, he headed towards the depths of the Divine Hall. In the depths, Zhuowen knew that there was a teleportation array to leave the Temporal Temple. This time, entering the Temporal Temple could be said to be extremely smooth. However, Zhuowen always felt strange in his heart. This was because his journey in the Temporal Temple was too smooth. He did not encounter any danger at all. This made him feel a little uncomfortable. Maybe I'm just being paranoid. Zhuowen laughed at himself. After entering the depths of the temple, he found the teleportation array and activated it without hesitation. When Zhuowen opened his eyes again, he looked around and discovered that he had returned to the place he had been before. Then, Zhuowen found that a murderous intent had locked onto him. This murderous aura was not unfamiliar to Zhuowen. It belonged to Kong Shi. Zhuowen cursed inwardly. He did not expect that the teleportation array would be so deceptive. It actually teleported him to his original place. Zhuowen did not hesitate to take out the space-time roulette and instantly disappeared from where he was. Boom! Where Zhuowen had been, the starry sky collapsed inch by inch. A figure surrounded by flames slowly appeared where Zhuowen had just appeared. Trying to escape. Do you think you can escape? The corners of Kong Shi's mouth curled into a smug smile. He looked at Zhuowen, who had escaped far away, and chased after him without hesitation. However, Kong Shi soon discovered that he was quickly left far behind by Zhuo when in the process of chasing. When did this guy's flying divine tool become so fast? Kong Shi looked at Zhuowen, who had turned into a black dot in shock, and could not help but mutter to himself in shock. He had investigated Zhuowen's flying divine tool before. Although its speed was extraordinary due to the space-time laws, it was still inferior to his. But now, Zhuowen's speed was much faster than before. In the blink of an eye, he had left him behind. Zhuowen looked at Kong Shi, who had been left behind, and was a little shocked by the space-time roulette's current speed. It seemed that the blue ball of light in the Temporal Temple was of great help to the space-time roulette's evolution. This Kong Shi is still a scourge. It's better to kill him as soon as possible. After discovering the terrifying speed of the space-time roulette, Zhuowen was no longer worried about his own safety. Instead, he had other thoughts. Kong Shi had targeted him several times. If he let Kong Shi go, the Phoenix people would probably send experts to hunt him down. If he killed Kong Shi now, Zhuowen would only be at the two extremities of life and death in the eyes of the Phoenix people's three elders. They would definitely not suspect him. Thinking of this, killing intent surged in Zhuowen's eyes. He took out Hu Yi's sacred arrow from his pocket world and began to inject energy from the special-grade Heavenly Law origin crystal vein into it. Kong Shi, you and I have no enmity. But since you were the one who was unjust first, don't blame me for being merciless. The killing intent in Zhuowen's eyes was monstrous. When it fused with the killing intent from Hu Yi's sacred arrow, the entire starry sky seemed to tremble. Under Zhuowen's control, the space-time roulette began to turn around and rush towards Kong Shi. Kong Shi could not help but feel anxious when he saw Zhuowen getting further and further away. He had been hiding here for more than half a month and had waited with great difficulty for Zhuowen to come out. He was very unwilling to accept that Zhuowen had escaped right under his nose. But soon, Kongsha discovered that Zhuowen, who had originally been far away, was actually approaching him. This stunned Kongsha for a moment before a look of ecstasy appeared on his face. "Zhuowen, I think you are simply courting death. You actually came back. Haha." Kongsha laughed loudly. But soon, his laughter came to an abrupt end because he felt an unprecedented killing intent approaching him. This was not the first time he had felt this killing intent. He had felt it when he was fighting Master Yuan Hui. It was coming from Zhuowen's peerless monster. He focused his eyes and immediately trembled in fear because he saw Zhuowen rushing over again with the space-time roulette. He was holding Hu Yi's sacred arrow in his hand and was constantly accumulating power. "I can't let him shoot that arrow." Kongsha was horrified. He took a step forward and rushed towards Zhuowen. Chapter 2704. Despairing killing intent. Kongsha was extremely fast, shooting over like a bolt of lightning. Very soon, the distance between him and Zhuowen rapidly decreased. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes, but he did not panic as he controlled the space-time roulette to rapidly retreat. The space-time roulette was no longer what it used to be. It was much faster than before, and it actually managed to pull away from Kongsha in an instant. Kongsha was flustered and exasperated, but there was nothing he could do. Even when he unleashed his fastest speed, he still could not catch up to Zhuowen. What made Kongsha even more furious was that Zhuowen was clearly faster than him, but he always maintained a distance of 1,000 meters from him. The Hu Yi's godly arrow's cold tip was aimed straight at him, and the terrifying killing intent made his hair stand on end. "I can't let this continue." Seeing the killing intent erupting from the Hu Yi's godly arrow grow more and more terrifying, and Kongsha was unable to catch up to Zhuowen, Kongsha began to consider retreating. He knew very well that if he allowed Zhuowen to shoot the Hu Yi's godly arrow in the end, he would definitely die. Thinking up to there, Kongsha took out his flight god artifact and immediately shot away from Zhuowen. He pushed his speed to the limit, almost as if he did not care about his life. Zhuowen looked at Kongsha, who had fled without a trace. The corners of his mouth revealed a mocking smile as he muttered to himself, "Can you really escape?" With that, Zhuowen pushed the space-time roulette to the limit, turning into an illusory streak of light as he shot away, disappearing from where he was in an instant. Kongsha desperately drove his flight god artifact, but his heart sank as he looked at Zhuowen, who was constantly approaching him. In particular, he discovered that the killing intent on the bloodstained horn was even more terrifying than before. The terrifying killing intent was like a huge net that gradually enveloped him. Kongsha knew that the terrifying killing intent was locked onto him. Once the killing intent completely locked onto him, he would be unable to escape. At this moment, Kongsha somewhat regretted acting alone. If he had known that the speed of Zhuowen's space-time roulette had suddenly become so terrifying, then he would not have come alone to kill Zhuowen. Now, he had even lost his life. "Zhuowen, let's talk nicely. I came here this time to pass on a message from Lady Chen Shui. Put down that weapon first." Kongsha quickly shouted to Zhuowen behind him. What did Chen Shui bring? The mocking smile on Zhuowen's face grew thicker. Not only did he not slow down, the killing intent in his eyes grew thicker. Zhuowen and Mu Chenxue had been husband and wife for many years. No one knew Mu Chenxue better than he did. If Mu Chenxue had something to say, she wouldn't pass the message to others. Instead, she would send a message to him directly. Kongsha's words might be able to deceive a child, but it was a waste of effort to deceive Zhuowen. Kongsha found that there were many flaws in his words. Faced with Zhuowen's increasingly terrifying killing intent, Kongsha's heart was filled with fear and he finally began to beg for mercy. It was a pity that even if Kongsha begged for mercy, Zhuowen remained indifferent. Today, he had to kill Kongsha. Otherwise, if he let him go, the Hu Yi's divine arrow on him would be exposed. Zhuowen was just a small character, so the Phoenix people did not pay attention to him. However, the Hu Yi's divine arrow on him was not normal. Even if it was a great ancient race like the Phoenix people, it was hard for them not to be moved. With Kongsha's thoughts, if he let him go, He would definitely spread the news to the Phoenix people that Zhuowen had the Hu Yi's divine arrow on him. When that time came, Zhuowen's situation would be worrying. Kong Shi also felt Zhuowen's killing intent. He said ruthlessly, "Zhuowen, I am a powerhouse of the Phoenix people. If you kill me, aren't you afraid that the Phoenix people will take revenge? As long as you let me go this time, I will pretend that nothing happened. You go your way, and I will go mine." Zhuowen stopped the spacetime roulette and said indifferently, "If I let you go, are you sure you will keep it a secret?" Seeing that Zhuowen had stopped, Kong Shi secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He quickly said, "I am willing to swear that I will never reveal your secret." After saying that, Kong Shi's heart was filled with hatred. If he could successfully escape this time, he would definitely take revenge. He would not say anything when the time came, but he would show the video of Zhuowen's battle to the Phoenix people's elders. With the Phoenix people's elders' eyesight, they would definitely be able to see that the blood-stained horn on Zhuowen's body was not ordinary. When the time came, even if he did not say anything, the elders would still look for Zhuowen. To him, this was killing two birds with one stone. If that's the case, Zhuowen nodded. The look of surprise on Kong Shi's face grew even stronger. However, Kong Shi quickly realized that something was amiss. After Zhuowen said those words, the killing intent in the surroundings grew even more terrifying, becoming like a world-shaking tsunami. Immediately after, Kong Shi realized that the endless killing intent had completely formed a large net, firmly locking him in place. Kong Shi's face turned pale. He knew that he had been completely locked in by the blood-stained horn. If he did not destroy the horn, or if the horn killed him, that thing would not stop. It would chase him to the ends of the earth. "Zhuowen, what is the meaning of this? Do you really intend to become enemies with the Phoenix people?" Kong Shi roared angrily. Zhuowen, however, sneered and said, "Do you think you can represent the entire Phoenix people? Don't laugh at me until my teeth fall out. After I kill you today, no one will know that I did it. Moreover, no one will suspect me because I am only the master of the heavenly Tao. Do you think anyone will believe that a heavenly Tao master cultivator can kill an eternal overlord?" Kong Shi's face darkened. Zhuowen was right. Zhuowen's cultivation level was too low. There was a huge gap between them. If not for Hu Yi's godly arrow, Kong Shi would not be a match for him at all. The problem now was, after he was killed, would anyone believe that Zhuowen, who was only the master of the heavenly Tao, was the murderer? The answer was obvious. It was impossible. When he thought of this, Kong Shi flicked his finger and secretly sent out a message. He wanted to send this message to the three elders. Unfortunately, the signal was intercepted by an invisible force. "A shielding formation? When did you set it up?" Kong Shi's face fell when he saw that the signal had been intercepted. Now that he couldn't even send out a signal, it was truly terrible for him. "Kong Shi, take this arrow of mine. If you can block this arrow, what harm is there in letting you live?" Zhuowen's indifferent voice rang out. The killing intent of the Hu Yi's godly arrow in his hand reached its peak. Then, a storm of killing intent rose up around Zhuowen. Dong! A sound like a drum rang out as the Hu Yi's godly arrow pierced through the air. For a moment, the sky was filled with killing intent, and an endless storm erupted. The entire starry sky seemed to be filled with killing intent, turning into a distorted void. Chapter 2705. Divine soared across the sky. Kong Shi's hair stood on end as he stared at the arrow of killing intent shooting towards him. Cold sweat dripped down from his forehead as a shadow of death loomed over his heart. It was as if he would die for sure if he took this arrow head on. He wanted to escape, but the killing intent was firmly locked onto him. As he continued to retreat, the divine arrow continued to advance and shoot towards him. Kong Shi roared as he retreated. He took out everything that could be used for defense from his ring, including divine artifacts, crystals, and herbs. He threw them all out. Kong Shi was truly scared now. He was so scared that he didn't know what to do. He took out everything that could be used in his ring. Bang! 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 The divine arrow soared through the sky, and anything that stood in its way was shattered into pieces, turning into dust. Kong Shi was still retreating, using the fastest speed he had ever used in his life. At the same time, he was constantly throwing out items to block the incoming arrows. Kong Shi's heart sank to the bottom when he saw the divine arrow shattering everything in its path. This was simply too terrifying. When Hu Yi's divine arrow broke through all the divine artifacts and arrived in front of Kong Shi, a trace of ruthlessness flashed through Kong Shi's eyes. He immediately tore off the necklace in front of his chest and spat out a mouthful of blood essence. Instantly, a golden light burst out from the necklace, turning into a golden light shield that enveloped Kong Shi. Bang! The Hu Yi divine arrow also shot over this time, smashing heavily against the golden light barrier and producing a thunderous boom. Zhuowen stared at the golden light shield in surprise. This was the first time he had seen something that could block the unstoppable Hu Yi's divine arrow. However, he soon discovered that the golden light shield was trembling violently. Then, he discovered that Kong Shi's face was growing paler and paler. His body was rapidly becoming thinner and thinner, and his cheeks were deeply sunken. In this short period of time, most of Kong Shi's life force had been taken away. Moreover, the life force in his body was still being taken away. Zhuowen guessed that Kong Shi was using his life force in exchange for this powerful defense. However, the price was extremely high. He was using his own life force as a catalyst. Within the span of a few breaths, a big part of Kong Shi's life force was drained away. Soon, Kong Shi's entire body was like a dried corpse. His hair had also turned white, and it was impossible to recognize his original appearance. Catcher. Without any more life force to provide, the golden light shield's power began to weaken. In the end, it was pierced through by the Hu Yi divine arrow, which then quickly pierced through Kong Shi's body. Bang! When the arrow pierced through Kong Shi's body, Kong Shi screamed miserably. His body began to disintegrate and disintegrate, eventually disintegrating into countless fine powder. Zhuowen heaved a sigh of relief while his countenance was pale. He summoned the space-time roulette to flash over to where Kong Shi perished, and then he put away the Hu Yi divine arrows that were scattered at the side. This Kong Shi is really hard to deal with. He actually has such a powerful secret method on him, Zhuowen sighed. In Zhuowen's opinion, Hu Yi's sacred arrow had always been an instant kill. However, Kong Shi had managed to hold on for quite some time under the might of Hu Yi's sacred arrow. Zhuowen knew that it was because he hadn't transferred enough energy to Hu Yi's sacred arrow. He had only transferred enough energy to Hu Yi's sacred arrow. If he had let Hu Yi's sacred arrow absorb it, this gluttonous monster would have sucked up all the energy in his entire top-grade Heavenly Law origin crystal vein. The more energy Hu Yi's sacred arrow absorbed, the more powerful it would be. Of course, the killing intent released by Hu Yi's sacred arrow would also be more terrifying. At that time, Zhuowen wasn't sure if he could withstand the terrifying killing intent completely released by Hu Yi's sacred arrow. At the same time, Zhuowen was also a little worried. Kong Shi was only an early-stage eternal overlord, yet he could withstand Hu Yi's sacred arrow for a moment. What if he was a peak eternal overlord or a third-step Dao confirming expert? Zhuowen knew that Hu Yi's sacred arrow wouldn't be able to kill a third-step Dao confirming expert in a single strike. Of course, Zhuowen also felt that his worries were groundless. Third-step Dao confirming experts were all old monsters that rarely appeared in the world. Such experts wouldn't easily appear in the world. After all, such experts were considered extremely top-notch existences among the various great forces. While Zhuowen was lost in thought, Zhuowen didn't notice that on the space-time roulette deck, a wisp of inconspicuous blue light silently approached Zhuowen like a snake. Whoosh! In an instant, this blue light followed Zhuowen's feet and rushed into Zhuowen's body. Zhuowen only felt the soles of his feet go numb. Then, he felt a strange energy rush through his body, rushing directly into the depths of his knowledge sea. Furthermore, Zhuowen realized that as this strange energy was moving through his body, he felt as if he had been electrocuted, and he was paralyzed on the spot. Hee. I've been waiting for this opportunity. My spirit has been dormant for so many years. Finally, I have a chance to possess someone. Although it's just a human, it's better than being a spirit all the time. Moreover, this human has an aura that makes me feel comfortable. It seems to be the aura of the ancestral sorcerer. Suddenly, An old voice sounded in Zhuowen's mind. Zhuowen's whole body went numb and he could only stand motionless. Listening to the strange voice that suddenly appeared in his mind, he knew that this spirit was planning to hibernate him. However, he was puzzled as to when this divine soul had been hidden by his side. The space-time temple master? Zhuowen thought of the blue light cluster on the altar of the space-time temple. When he found that this blue light cluster was actively refined by the space-time roulette, he felt that it was strange. Now, it seemed that it was this spirit's doing. However, this spirit was indeed powerful. Zhuowen had been careful enough, but he didn't find anything wrong. It could be seen that this spirit was indeed very powerful in terms of concealment. Boy. Good reaction. I am indeed the space-time master. Speaking of which, I have to thank you for bringing me out of the space-time temple and bringing me such a perfect body. I feel the aura of the ancestral sorcerer on you. Could it be that you have fused with the ancestral sorcerer's venom? In his mind, the old voice was full of pride and at the same time, there was a hint of surprise. You know about the ancestral sorcerer's venom? Zhuowen was shocked. Haha. Boy, let me tell you. The ancestor of the Spacetime Beast clan is the ancestral sorcerer Candle Dragon. I came here looking for the ancestral sorcerer's venom, but I didn't expect that I would be discovered by the experts of the human clan and a great battle would break out. However, I already have an idea about the ancestral sorcerer's venom. As long as I possess you, I will look for my ancestral sorcerer's venom. Haha, with the fusion of two ancestral sorcerer's venom, my strength will reach an unprecedented level. At that time, the Spacetime Beast clan is destined to surpass the Sorcerer clan and become the largest clan in the untainted heavenly domain. The old voice was full of unconcealable excitement, and Zhuowen was surprised. It turned out that the Spacetime Master had come to look for the Candle Dragon's venom. Chapter 2706. The Spacetime Master Kid. I'll take your body without hesitation, haha. The old voice chuckled and began to attack Zhuowen's spirit. He wanted to destroy Zhuowen's spirit and replace it. Ah, what is this? Is this the Pangu banner? Heavens, why is there such a thing in your spirit? Ah, no. Just as the Spacetime Master's spirit was about to take over Zhuowen's body, he was stopped by the Pangu banner. The Pangu banner fluttered in the wind, its surface glowing with a mysterious light. Under this light, the Spacetime Master's soul shrank rapidly. The power of his soul was like a candle flame, about to be extinguished at any moment. Zhuowen's eyes were calm. After knowing that the Spacetime Master had the Pangu banner in his spirit, he was not afraid of being taken over. The Pangu banner belonged to Pangu, and Pangu was the master who created the world. When such an existence appeared in his spirit, it was almost invulnerable. It was basically impossible for anyone to take over his spirit. This was also the main reason why Zhuowen could be so calm when the Spacetime Master tried to take over his body. He knew that no matter how strong the Spacetime Master's spirit was, he could not take over his body. Spare me. Let me live. The Spacetime Master panicked. The Pangu banner was too restrictive on his spirit. He could not resist and could only beg for mercy. Zhuowen did not care at all. He just watched as the Spacetime Master's spirit was constantly weakened before his eyes. When the Spacetime Master's spirit was almost transparent and about to collapse at any time, Zhuowen swept out with his consciousness and pulled the Spacetime Master's spirit out. At this moment, the Spacetime Master's spirit was almost transparent and severely damaged. Zhuowen reached out with his right hand and grabbed the Spacetime Lord's soul. Then, he began to use a soul-searching technique. Since the Spacetime Master knew about the Candle Dragon parasite, Zhuowen naturally would not let him go. The Spacetime Master howled furiously. This person in front of him actually dared to search his soul. This was a complete disregard for him, the Spacetime Master. This was an insult to him. However, the Spacetime Technique's soul was too weak. He didn't even have the strength to resist. He could only watch as Zhuowen carefully searched his soul memories. After Zhuowen finished reading, he flicked his finger and released a flame that burned the Spacetime Master's soul to ashes. The Spacetime Master had always harbored ill intentions, so Zhuowen naturally wouldn't show him any mercy. At the same time, Zhuowen's divine sense carefully examined the spacetime roulette under his feet, and then his right hand reached into the bottom of the spacetime roulette. In an inconspicuous groove, he found a black ring. This black ring was the spacetime lord's small world. It was secretly placed at the bottom of the spacetime wheel by the spacetime lord when the blue ball of light fused with the spacetime wheel. This was so that he could take it out and use it after completely possessing Zhuowen. The spacetime master did indeed have clues about the candle dragon parasite, and the clues were in this ring. From the spacetime master's memories, he learned that the spacetime master had obtained an incomplete map. It was said that this incomplete map pointed to the location of the candle dragon parasite, but the map was too incomplete, so the spacetime master found the wrong place and found the 8 heavens. He didn't find any trace of the candle dragon parasite in the 8 heavens, so he guessed that this map should be somewhere in the Xian-Mi heavenly domain. Unfortunately, as soon as he entered the Xian-Mi heavenly domain, he was discovered by human race powerhouses and was chased all the way. He was almost destroyed in body and soul. In the end, he was seriously injured and hid in a mysterious space that he opened up in the 8 heavens. The spacetime key was deliberately distributed by the spacetime master so that someone could gather 3 spacetime keys and enter the spacetime temple. Then, he could possess the body and be reborn. It could be said that the spacetime master's plan was very good, but unfortunately, he met Zhuowen. When Zhuowen opened the ring, he was immediately shocked because he found more resources in the space of the ring than in the spacetime temple. Among them, he found a mountain of special-grade Heavenly Path origin crystals. The number of special-grade Heavenly Path origin crystals in the ring was at least twice as many as the ones in the cellar. In addition, there were even more divine medicines, materials, and other resources. Zhuowen forcibly suppressed the excitement in his heart and began to search for the incomplete map that the spacetime master had mentioned in this large pile of resources. Soon, Zhuowen found a piece of paper that glowed with a silver light in the corner. This piece of paper was only the size of a palm, and from the map recorded on it, it could be seen that this was only a quarter of a complete map. Because the map was too incomplete, Zhuowen couldn't see where the location on the map was. However, Zhuowen had already learned from the memories of the spacetime master that he had rejected the 8 heavens and the primitive heavenly realm. Therefore, the location recorded on this map could only be the Xian-Mi heavenly realm. When Zhuowen went to Xian-Mi heavenly domain this time, it seemed like he had to find a detailed map of Xian-Mi heavenly domain. Once he could find the location that corresponded to this map fragment, Zhuowen knew that he would be able to find the location of the candle dragon Gu worm. Zhuowen put away the small world of the spacetime master with satisfaction. The harvest this time could be said to be extremely rich. The number of resources in the small world of the spacetime master was beyond Zhuowen's expectations. In particular, there were twice as many special-grade Heavenly Path origin crystals in the small world as there were in the spacetime temple. This was definitely a pleasant surprise for Zhuowen. At the very least, his 3-star Pangu sacred body had been cultivated to the peak. With these special-grade Heavenly Path origin crystals, Zhuowen could even use Hu Yi's sacred arrow several times. Hu Yi's sacred arrow was now Zhuowen's final trump card, and the special-grade Heavenly Path origin crystals were really very important to Zhuowen. Zhuowen once again came in front of the natural chasm. As he looked at the empty natural chasm, his eyes revealed a solemn expression. Zhuowen took out the beast bone array disk and began to set up an anti-gravity array on the spacetime roulette. Since he had obtained Guo Yi and Shi Huai's spaceship, he had been studying the anti-gravity array on the spaceship during this period of time. It could be considered a small achievement. At the very least, he could simulate setting up an anti-gravity array. Although the anti-gravity array was extremely advanced and there were some flaws in the array that Zhuowen had set up, Zhuowen knew that it should be more than enough to resist the terrifying gravity in the natural chasm. Zhuowen's main concern now was the crisis of the strange beasts that could appear at any time in the natural chasm. According to Fire Plume, Zhuowen knew that the strange beasts in the natural chasm were extremely terrifying. The weakest one was at the Heavenly Pathmaster level, and it was said that the strongest one could possibly reach the 3rd step Dao validation level. Chapter 2707 Heavenly Mochuan spent a few days setting up his imitation of the anti-gravity array on the spacetime roulette. To be on the safe side, Zhuowen checked it repeatedly. After confirming that there were no mistakes in the anti-gravity array, Zhuowen was relieved. Jumping onto the spacetime roulette, Zhuowen drove it into the heavenly moat in front of him. Boom! The moment he entered the heavenly moat, Zhuowen clearly felt the spacetime roulette shake violently. He even felt like he was falling. However, the anti-gravity array around the spacetime roulette also came into play. The array emitted a faint green light, and the feeling of falling quickly disappeared. Zhuowen knew that the anti-gravity array on the spacetime roulette had taken effect. Zhuowen was very vigilant. He knew that the heavenly moat was not an ordinary place. He had to be very alert. The heavenly moat was very big. Zhuowen still could not see the other side of the heavenly moat even after traveling for half a day. Swoosh! Swoosh! Suddenly, the sound of something breaking through the air attracted Zhuowen's attention. Black shadows swept over from the front. These shadows were the size of a palm and looked like spiders. Moreover, the strange thing was that these spiders actually had thin wings that were like the wings of a cicada. They flapped their wings and rushed over explosively. Their speed was so fast that it had simply reached an astonishing level. Although these winged spiders were not big, their auras were extremely powerful. With Zhuowen's divine sense, he immediately sensed that these strange spiders were all heavenly Tao masters. Moreover, it was not just one, but a group. At a rough glance, this group of spiders was close to 100. Close to 100 heavenly Tao masters in a harsh environment like the heavenly moat. Most cultivators would not be able to resist. Zhuowen's eyes were dark. He casually used the slaughtering Tao finger. Every slaughtering Tao finger could kill a large group of spiders. However, Zhuowen discovered that after he killed most of the spiders, the remaining spiders were emitting a strange buzzing sound. Zhuowen could hear the anger of these spiders from the buzzing sound. Then, Zhuowen heard even more intense sounds of breaking through the air. In front of him, there were thousands of black shadows rapidly rushing over. They were all spiders with wings. Zhuowen's expression changed drastically. He instantly blasted out 10 slaughter Tao fingers, creating a huge gap in the numerous spiders that were blocking his way. Then, Zhuowen followed the gap and turned into a stream of light, escaping. There were too many spiders, and Zhuowen didn't want to fight them head-on. Furthermore, he had always kept in mind how terrifying the natural chasm was. If he were to cause too much of a commotion here, it was hard to guarantee that he wouldn't attract the attention of other terrifying strange beasts in the natural chasm. Zhuowen continued to move forward, but he soon realized that something was wrong. He realized that the area he was in was even darker than the surroundings. This pitch-black area was about a mile or so, and no matter how quickly Zhuowen urged the spacetime roulette to leave, he found that this pitch-black shadow actually moved with him. Due to the gravity of the natural chasm, the spacetime roulette's speed was much slower than in the outside world. However, its speed was still not to be underestimated. However, this shadow was able to follow the spacetime roulette closely. It was obvious that this shadow wasn't simple. Zhuowen's heart sank slightly. He knew that he must have been targeted by some strange beast. Sure enough, the spacetime roulette didn't fly far before Zhuowen discovered that the spacetime roulette was trembling violently. Then, it swayed violently. Zhuowen's divine sense was shocked to discover that in the shadow below the spacetime roulette, a pitch-black head slowly emerged. This head raised its head, opened its bloody mouth, and swallowed the spacetime roulette. Although the spacetime roulette tried its best to break free, it found that there seemed to be some terrifying stickiness in the shadow. The spacetime roulette could only circle in place. Seeing that the big mouth was about to swallow the spacetime roulette, Zhuowen couldn't care less. He kept the spacetime roulette into his small world. Then, he crushed an escape talisman and instantly disappeared. When Zhuowen reappeared in another void, his body trembled. He felt the terrifying gravity below the natural chasm. He could only continuously stimulate the energy in his body to resist the terrifying gravity below the natural chasm. The gravity of the natural chasm is really terrifying. Even I can't move an inch under this gravity. No wonder the flying ships of the cultivators from the Xian-Mi heavenly domain were equipped with anti-gravity arrays. Zhuowen muttered to himself. After experiencing the terrifying gravity of the natural chasm, Zhuowen summoned the space-time roulette again and jumped on it. Next, Zhuowen became even more cautious. However, no matter how careful Zhuowen was, he still encountered all kinds of dangers along the way. Most of these dangers came from the bloodthirsty strange beasts in the natural chasm. Fortunately, Zhuowen's strength was terrifying enough, so he was able to resist the attacks of these terrifying strange beasts and continue forward. However, Zhuowen was a little worried about Crepe Myrtle Starlord. Back then, Crepe Myrtle Starlord had confidently left the Great Brahma domain, intending to enter the Xian-Mi heavenly domain through the natural chasm. Although Crepe Myrtle Starlord's strength was not bad, in front of the terrifying strange beasts in the natural chasm, it was still not enough. Any one of these strange beasts could exhaust Crepe Myrtle Starlord, not to mention the most annoying gravity of the natural chasm. He didn't understand the natural chasm at all back then. If he had known how terrifying the natural chasm was, he wouldn't have let Crepe Myrtle Starlord leave alone. I hope my old friend can successfully cross the natural chasm. Zhuowen sighed softly. Although he knew that Crepe Myrtle Starlord's chances of survival in the natural chasm were slim, he still prayed in his heart. Boom, boom, boom. All of a sudden, Zhuowen sensed a frightening energy fluctuation from far in front of him. He knew that there should be two experts fighting in front of him. This was the aftermath of their battle. From the fluctuations, it could be seen that the two combatants were at least eternal overlords. Zhuowen summoned the Beast Bone formation disk and set up several layers of concealment formations on the surface of the spacetime wheel. Only then was the aura of the spacetime wheel completely concealed. Afterward, Zhuowen continued to move forward. As he sensed more and more intense fluctuations, Zhuowen knew that the battle ahead must be extremely fierce. Zhuowen didn't dare to get too close. Instead, he found a rather large meteorite nearby and hid behind it, shrinking his head as he looked ahead. He saw that a few thousand meters ahead, two huge strange beasts were fighting fiercely. Chapter 2708. Origin of Earth. Upon closer inspection, Zhuowen discovered that the two strange beasts were over 10,000 feet in size. One of them looked like a leopard, but its entire body was covered in crocodile-like scales. Its bones were as hard as steel, and its strength was extraordinary. Every time it clashed, it bared its cold fangs and sharp claws. The other strange beast was furry all over, like a furball. At first glance, it looked very cute, but Zhuowen wouldn't overlook the terror of this strange beast just because of its appearance. Every attack of this strange beast contained earth-shattering power. Even Zhuowen couldn't ignore it. Without a doubt, the two strange beasts in front of him were both eternal overlord-level existences. Moreover, Zhuowen discovered that these two strange beasts were even more terrifying than the Kongshe of the Phoenix people. In a one-on-one fight, Zhuowen wouldn't be a match for either of them, unless he used Huyi's divine arrow. Upon closer inspection, Zhuowen discovered a stone pillar standing in the center of the two strange beasts' battle. The stone pillar was crystal clear, as if it was carved out of jade. The surface of the stone pillar was especially engraved with dragons and phoenixes, birds and beasts. All of this was to set off the earth-yellow bead at the top of the stone pillar. What a dense aura of earth! Is this the origin of Earth? The moment Zhuowen noticed the earth-yellow bead at the top of the stone pillar, he also sensed the extremely dense aura of Earth within the bead. He immediately guessed that this bead contained the origin of Earth. Zhuowen had obtained the origin of ice before, so he wasn't unfamiliar with the origin of elemental elements. Moreover, the origin of Earth was even more useful than the origin of ice. This was because the origin of Earth could create the Earth. It was the origin of the Earth, and also the origin of the world. If Zhuowen could obtain the origin of Earth and integrate it into the Devourer King's internal space, Zhuowen believed that it would only be a matter of time before the Devourer King's internal space transformed into a great world. Zhuowen glanced at the two strange beasts that were still fighting fiercely. He knew that these two strange beasts were fighting because of the origin of Earth. Zhuowen did not rashly make a move immediately. Instead, he silently lay in wait. Any one of these two exotic beasts was extremely powerful. Moreover, they were in a state of frenzy right now. If Zhuowen tried to snatch it now, he would probably be attacked by the two exotic beasts together. However, if the two exotic beasts were both injured, or if one of them fell, it would be the best time for Zhuowen to snatch the Earth Origin. Boom! Boom! The battle between the two exotic beasts grew more and more intense. Powerful ripples spread out, causing many of the nearby exotic beasts to flee, not daring to stay for long. Zhuowen held his breath, not daring to act rashly. He noticed that the two exotic beasts seemed to be inadvertently glancing in his direction during the battle. Obviously, the two exotic beasts had discovered him. However, the two exotic beasts did not pay too much attention to him, nor did they have any intention of ferreting out Zhuowen. Instead, they continued to fight fiercely, not stopping until one of them was dead. Zhuowen knew that because his aura wasn't strong, the two exotic beasts obviously didn't think much of him. That was why the two exotic beasts continued to fight. Roar! Suddenly, the leopard covered in scales let out a loud roar. The scales all over its body began to stand up, revealing cold metal plates. The moment these metal plates stood up, they grew to a terrifying length of several dozen zhong. Each metal plate was like a mountain of metal, a shocking sight to behold. Whoosh! 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 After the metal plates stopped growing, they actually shot out like a rain of metal, enveloping the furball monster. The furball monster was caught off guard and was pierced by these metal plates, causing it to howl in pain. These metal plates were too sharp and huge. Each of them pierced deep into its innards, and the countless metal plates seemed to have turned it into mush from the inside out. In just an instant, the furball monster was turned into a bloody mess. It was a tragic sight, with blood splattering everywhere like a rain of blood. It was an exceptionally terrifying sight. After releasing those metal plates, the leopard's entire body became bare, and blood flowed out from its skin. The scales were originally the leopard's skin, and now that the scales had fallen off, it was as if the skin had been peeled off. Its injuries could be said to be quite serious. Zhuowen's eyes lit up. The move the leopard had used was clearly a desperate attack. Although it had severely injured the furball monster, it had also suffered extremely serious injuries. Logically speaking, this should be the best time to make a move, but Zhuowen still did not make a move. His gaze fell on the furball monster, and his consciousness locked onto it. At this moment, the furball monster was almost a bloody mess, a tragic sight. Although it was weak, it had not completely lost its life. Roar! The furball monster raised its head to the sky and roared. Its body swelled several times, and then it began to spin rapidly, rushing toward the leopard at high speed. The furball monster's rolling speed was simply too fast. Before Zhuowen could react, the furball monster had already slammed into the leopard's body. The terrifying speed created an extremely powerful impact. The leopard let out a mournful cry and was sent flying. One of its front legs was directly smashed and torn apart. The furball monster did not give up. It turned into a spinning ball again and again, slamming into the leopard's body again and again. However, the leopard was too weak, and the furball monster was too fast. The leopard could only passively endure the furball monster's terrifying attacks. Poochie! The moment the furball monster slammed into the leopard's body again, the leopard raised its head to the sky and roared. Its huge body directly collapsed, and blood stained the void, turning into a mournful river of blood. It was an extremely tragic sight. Zhuowen's heart trembled. The furball monster's attack was too terrifying. Even if it was him, he would not be able to do anything if he faced that high spinning speed. He might not even be able to react in time. Poochie! A large amount of blood gushed out of the furball monster's body. It collapsed to the side, on the verge of death. The furball monster was already heavily injured, and now that it had used such a desperate move, the burden was too heavy. Its life was now in danger. However, the furball monster's vitality was extremely tenacious. Although it was on the verge of death, it still struggled to touch the stone pillar. It was clearly concerned about the Earth origin on the stone pillar. Zhuowen knew that it was time for him to make a move. Zhuowen controlled the spacetime roulette and turned into a streak of light. In a few breaths' time, he had arrived at the stone pillar. Zhuowen did not hesitate to take the Earth Origin bead in his hand and store it in his pocket dimension. At this moment, the furball monster was slowly approaching and was about to touch the Earth Origin. However, it did not expect that the human who had been hiding on the side would suddenly snatch it away. The furball monster was enraged. It actually ignored the terrifying injuries on its body and rolled once more. It actually planned to use that desperate move again. Zhuowen grabbed the Earth Origin and controlled the spacetime roulette to immediately escape. Chapter 2709. Great World Formation. Zhuowen had seen how terrifying this move was. He did not dare to be careless and immediately put away the spacetime roulette. The furball's attack was too terrifying. If it hit the spacetime roulette directly, the anti-gravity array on the surface of the spacetime roulette would definitely be destroyed. Therefore, Zhuowen immediately put away the spacetime roulette and faced the furball alone. There was no doubt that the furball was too fast. With Zhuowen's speed, it would be easy for it to catch up with him. Therefore, he had no choice but to face the furball directly. Roar! The furball was very fast. In an instant, it was in front of Zhuowen. Like a mountain, it intended to crush Zhuowen into a meat patty. Zhuowen formed a seal with both hands and used the profound creation mysterious light without hesitation. A mysterious light enveloped Zhuowen's body, turning into a barrier of light. Boom! The furball directly hit Zhuowen. Then, Zhuowen found that the profound creation mysterious light lasted for about 10 breaths before it began to shatter. The moment the profound creation mysterious light shattered, the power of Zhuowen's 3-star Pangu sacred body erupted. He threw out a punch and hit the furball. Crack! Zhuowen could clearly hear the sound of bones breaking in his right hand. He spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying. When he finally stopped, his face was pale and bloodless. Just as he was about to defend against the furball's next attack, the furball let out an extremely unwilling roar. Then, the roar stopped abruptly. The furball exploded into a cloud of blood mist and died just like that. Zhuowen could not dodge in time and was enveloped by the blood mist. He smelled a fishy stench and his whole body was stained with blood. Zhuowen was stunned. Because he could not control the serious injuries in his body, he spat out a mouthful of blood. He quickly took a healing medicine and barely suppressed the serious injuries in his body. After figuring out the details, Zhuowen let out a sigh of relief. He knew that the furball had probably reached its limit. However, because Zhuowen had snatched the origin of Earth, the furball was enraged. It did not care about its own condition and used a desperate attack. In the end, because it could not withstand it, its entire body collapsed. Zhuowen secretly rejoiced in his heart. He had used the profound creation mysterious light earlier, but he had still suffered such serious injuries. If the furball had used that move again, Zhuowen knew that he would not have been able to avoid it. Translation mysterious light. Otherwise, the consequences. The harvest this time is pretty good. After obtaining the Earth Origin, the space within Devourer King's body will be completely transformed. Zhuowen muttered to himself. He summoned the spacetime roulette, leaped onto it, and disappeared on the spot. In the following period, Zhuowen did not encounter any danger. He also successfully integrated the Earth Origin into the Devourer King's inner world. In order to speed up the transformation, Zhuowen even integrated the everlasting Ice Lotus into the Devourer King's inner world. One must know that the everlasting Ice Lotus contained the Ice Origin. The integration of the two origins finally caused the Devourer King's inner world to undergo earth-shattering changes. It was filled with vitality and the world's operating principles became clearer. Suddenly, the newly formed inner world in the Devourer King's inner world began to shrink. In the end, it shrunk to the size of a Xiaohei dot. Then, the Xiaohei dot disappeared into the Devourer King's inner world. Hey! What's going on? The newly formed inner world is gone. Zhuowen was dumbfounded. He kept probing the Devourer King's inner world and discovered that the inner world had indeed disappeared. This made Zhuowen panic. The Riker clansmen were still in that inner world. Now that the inner world had disappeared for no reason, what would happen to the Riker clansmen? But soon, Zhuowen discovered that he could see the inner world again. However, this time, he did not see it from the Devourer King's inner world. Instead, he saw it from the outside. In the center of his palm, a shadowy black dot appeared. It looked like a mole. Zhuowen saw the inner world from this inconspicuous black dot. After the inner world was formed, it became independent. Zhuowen was shocked. He did not expect that the Devourer King's inner world could become independent and become an independent inner world. Now, this great world had turned into an insignificant black mole that was attached to his palm. It was very unremarkable. Zhuowen was overjoyed. If the inner world could become independent, it meant that he, Zhuowen, would be able to enter it. Thinking of this, Zhuowen disappeared from the spot with a thought. On the space-time roulette's deck, there was only an inconspicuous Xiao Hei dot. Not long after, Zhuowen reappeared on the deck. That Xiao Hei dot was extremely intelligent. It landed on Zhuowen's palm and moved up Zhuowen's arm. Zhuowen was excited. This inner world was very strange. No matter how he probed it with his spiritual consciousness, he could not find it. He only thought that it was an ordinary black dot. It seemed like this inner world was a good choice for hiding. Of course, the inner world was also very big. It was much bigger than the inner world on his body. It was also more hidden. Therefore, Zhuowen moved everything from the inner world into the inner world. Zhuowen traversed the heavenly moat for another half a month. During this half a month, danger lurked everywhere. However, Zhuowen's strength was still there. Even if there were second-step Dao confirming strange beasts, Zhuowen could easily avoid them. As long as there were no third-step Dao confirming strange beasts, Zhuowen knew that he would have a chance to escape. Moreover, Zhuowen had been constantly cultivating the Pangu sacred body during this half a month. Finally, he had reached the peak of the 3-star realm. However, he had consumed 1/3 of the special class Heavenly Law origin crystals. At the same time, Zhuowen also found that although his original body was only the Heavenly Law Master, the consumption of special class Heavenly Law origin crystals was almost the same as the consumption of the Pangu sacred body. This was especially true when he consolidated the Heavenly Law Master realm and wanted to break through again. However, after consuming a large number of special class Heavenly Law origin crystals, he felt that he had not touched the slightest clue of the Daoyuan Master realm. Zhuowen suspected that if he absorbed all the special grade Heavenly Dao origin crystals, it was still unknown whether his main body would be able to break through. After several attempts, Zhuowen found that his original body was too strange. This was because the energy required for his original body to break through was too terrifying. It was as if his original body's realm had countless shackles that trapped him and prevented him from breaking through smoothly. If the shackles of other ordinary cultivators could be compared to a chain, Zhuowen found that his original body needed thousands of chains to break through. Therefore, the energy required for his original body to break through was thousands of times more than that of ordinary cultivators. Zhuowen was puzzled. He felt that this was too illogical. Could there really be a problem with his Dao root? When he thought of this, Zhuowen was somewhat eager to enter the Xian Mi heavenly domain to test his Dao root. Chapter 27:10. The skinny man. Half a month later, Zhuowen discovered a dot of light in the distance. In this cold and pitch-black heavenly chasm, this dot of light seemed so dazzling and unique. Zhuowen was excited. He knew that this dot of light was the pier that Xian Mi heavenly domain set up on the other side of heavenly chasm. As for the pier on the other side of heavenly chasm, he had heard about it from Fire Plume. Therefore, he knew that the dot of light was the pier. As long as he entered the pier, he would be able to reach Xian Mi heavenly domain. When Zhuowen approached the pier, he discovered that it was rather lively. There were many people moving about and it was bustling with activity. Moreover, he discovered that most of the cultivators left from this pier and entered heavenly chasm. Zhuowen knew that these should be cultivators who were planning to head to the 8 great heavenly domains. Looking at the anxious looks of these cultivators, It seemed like they didn't know what happened in the 8 great heavenly domains. When Zhuowen controlled the space-time roulette to land on the pier, he was immediately stopped by a skinny man. This skinny man's skin was very dark and he was as thin as a match. However, he wore loose clothes which made him look even skinnier. However, what surprised Zhuowen was that this skinny man's cultivation wasn't weak. He was actually a Dao Yuan master. Moreover, from the looks of it, he should be the manager of this pier. Zhuowen looked at this skinny man indifferently. After all, he wasn't a cultivator from Xianmi heavenly domain. Since this skinny man stopped him, there must be something. If he took the initiative to ask, he would inevitably be suspected by this person. I say, don't you have to pay crystal stones to enter the pier? The skinny man looked suspiciously at Zhuowen and asked. Zhuowen smiled and said, "This brother, I was too anxious just now. Therefore, I forgot about this matter. Moreover, this is my first time leaving Heavenly Chasm. Now that I'm back, I don't know the rules. I hope you can forgive me." The skinny man nodded and stretched out his hand. He said impatiently, 10 low-grade Heavenly Dao origin crystals. Quickly hand them over and then leave. Zhuowen revealed a troubled expression. He did indeed have Heavenly Dao origin crystals on him, but they were all high-grade Heavenly Dao origin crystals at the very least. He really did not have any low-grade Heavenly Dao origin crystals. After all, low-grade Heavenly Dao origin crystals were basically useless to Zhuowen. He didn't care much about low-grade Heavenly Dao origin crystals, so he didn't deliberately collect them. What? You don't even have 10 low-grade Heavenly Law origin crystals? The skinny man saw the difficult expression on Zhuowen's face. He glared at him and his tone became somewhat unfriendly. Zhuowen helplessly took out a high-grade Heavenly Dao origin crystal and handed it to the skinny man. This should be enough, right? When the skinny man saw that Zhuowen had only taken out 1 crystal, he was furious. However, his expression quickly changed and he immediately put the crystal into his sleeve. As he felt the surging energy of the Heaven Dao within his sleeve, the emaciated man looked around, and he was extremely excited when he noticed that no one was paying attention to him. This was because the crystal that this white-clothed youth had taken out was actually a high-grade Heavenly Dao origin crystal. He had been in charge of the docks for countless years, and this was not the first time he had seen a high-grade Heavenly Dao origin crystal. After all, there would occasionally be almighty experts who would pass through the docks and enter the natural moat to temper themselves. These experts would naturally use high-grade Heavenly Dao origin crystals to trade. However, this was indeed the first time the skinny man had obtained a high-grade Heavenly Dao origin crystal. At the same time, the skinny man was shocked. He sized up the youth before him. This kid's aura is very weak. He's only a Heavenly Dao Lord, but he actually has a high-grade Heavenly Dao origin crystal on him. Moreover, this kid took out a high-grade Heavenly Dao origin crystal right off the bat. Could it be that this kid has quite a few high-grade Heavenly Dao origin crystals on him? When he thought of this, a hint of greed appeared in the skinny man's eyes. He looked at Zhuowen with a burning gaze. Zhuowen naturally noticed the greed in the skinny man's eyes. He narrowed his eyes and sneered in his heart. This guy better not provoke him. Otherwise, don't blame me, Zhuowen, for not showing mercy. Brother, can I leave now? Zhuowen asked indifferently. The skinny man came back to his senses and revealed a rare smile. Moreover, there was a hint of enthusiasm in his smile. He said, "Young master, I see that you must be quite tired from your long journey. I know of a pretty good inn. The proprietress of that inn is very friendly and knows this area very well. Little brother, I see that this is your first time out on an adventure. Go to that inn and stay there. I guarantee that you'll be satisfied." Zhuowen sneered in his heart and asked casually, "Does that proprietress sell a map of the Xianmi heavenly domain?" "A map? Don't you have one on you?" The skinny man looked at Zhuowen in surprise. Zhuowen's heart trembled. It seemed that he had asked the wrong question. From the reaction of this skinny man, the cultivators of the Xianmi heavenly domain basically carried a map with them. In fact, what Zhuowen didn't know was that the Xianmi heavenly domain was really too big. It was much bigger than the 8 heavenly domains combined. There were countless plane worlds inside and the geography was extremely complicated. Even the cultivators of the Xian Mi heavenly domain had a high chance of getting lost. If they didn't carry a map with them, they probably wouldn't know which remote alley they would walk into. It could be said that when the cultivators of the Xian Mi heavenly domain went out, a map was necessary. Therefore, when Zhuowen asked this question, the skinny man was so surprised. I accidentally dropped my map, so I need to buy a new one, Zhuowen said very calmly. The skinny man nodded and didn't suspect too much. He said, the proprietress of that inn is also a famous map maker. Naturally, she has a map for sale. Moreover, the map she makes should be the best quality in this area. At the same time, it's also the most expensive. Okay, tell me the address of that inn, Zhuowen said. I'll take you there directly. The skinny man was very enthusiastic. He called for another person not far away to help him manage the dock. Then, he hurriedly left the dock with Zhuowen. Although Zhuowen knew that this guy didn't have any good intentions, he didn't expose him. With his current strength, this skinny man only had the strength of a Dao Yuan master. If he found trouble with him, he would be seeking his own death. Moreover, he had just arrived and didn't know much about the Xian Mi heavenly domain. Now that there was a local leading the way, it was naturally the best for Zhuowen. It would save him the trouble of finding someone else. Along the way, Zhuowen chatted casually with this person. He found out that this person's name was Gui Shan, and he was one of the managers of the Impermanence dock. The Impermanence dock was the dock set up by the Xian Mi heavenly domain in the heavenly moat. Moreover, this was only one of the docks in the Xian Mi heavenly domain. Chapter 27:11. Huanglin. Of course, the Dao sects that could control the pier were all relatively powerful. After all, the pier was a place with high profits. There were so many cultivators entering and exiting the pier every day, and every cultivator had to pay a certain amount of crystal stones. The amount of crystal stones they received every day was terrifying. Even an ordinary Daoist sect level force would slowly grow stronger by relying on the pier. And this Impermanence pier was controlled by Impermanence Palace, and Impermanence Palace was the only Dao sects in the area. Of course, Impermanence Palace's foundation was extremely deep, and they were one of the top Dao sects. It could be said that Impermanence Palace was an existence that could not be offended in this area, and could be considered a local tyrant. Not long after Gui Shan left with Zhuowen, the pier suddenly became lively, and there was an uproar. A group of about 20 people walked over from behind the pier, and the person in the lead had an extraordinary aura. His strength was unfathomable, and his aura was as terrifying as the abyss. Just by standing there, this person gave off an extremely terrifying sense of oppression. This person looked to be in his 40s, and his long hair draped over his shoulders. He wore a black robe, and his gaze was cold and oppressive. Looking carefully, there was a hint of anger between his brows, as if something was bothering him. Beside this middle-aged man, there was an old man in his 60s with a ruddy complexion. He was smiling as he followed beside this middle-aged man. Zhuowen and Gui Shan did not walk far, and naturally noticed the sudden change in atmosphere at the pier. They turned around and saw this group of people. Who are they? Zhuowen saw that the pier had quietened down after this group of people appeared, and he could not help but ask. Gui Shan also saw this group of people, and his body trembled as he said excitedly, "It's actually Palace Master. I never thought that Palace Master would personally come to the pier, and that person is, from the Huangji aristocratic family? Heavens! Why is the Huangji aristocratic family also here? Did something big happen?" Gui Shan shouted excitedly, and Zhuowen frowned, but he did not say anything. From Gui Shan's words, Zhuowen knew that the old man in the group was actually the Palace Master of Impermanence Palace. Anika Palace Master was actually smiling at the middle-aged man. It seemed like this middle-aged man was an existence of high status even in the Huangji family. Speaking of which, Zhuowen had quite a bit of conflict with the irregular palace and the Huangji family. The young Palace Master of the Impermanence Palace, young Master Impermanence, was killed by Zhuowen. The third prince of the Huangji family, Huang Ziyi, was also killed by Zhuowen. At the same time, the two primordial chaos lords from Impermanence Palace were also killed by Zhuoan. Of course, compared to Impermanence Palace's losses, Huangji family's losses were truly disastrous. Huang Ziyi was originally a silk pants. Although he was a direct descendant of the Huangji family, he wasn't the type that was highly valued. The Huangji family didn't care too much about the loss of Elder Bai and Elder Wu, who were both peak primordial chaos cultivators. However, Zhu De was a Heaven's Mandate master and was considered a powerful existence in the second step Dao validation. Even the Huangji family had to spend a lot of resources to cultivate such an expert. Losing him like this was extremely painful for the Huangji family. If Zhu De's death was only painful, then the death of an eternal array Dao great master like Master Yuan Hui was really a great loss to the Huangji family. This time, the Huangji family had discovered that the life flames of Huang Ziyi, Master Yuan Hui, and the others had all been extinguished, causing an internal commotion within the family. Therefore, they had sent the third master of the Huangji family, Huang Lin, to the 8 heavens to investigate the truth. Zhuoan watched Huang Lin, Palace Master Fu Qi, and the others leave the dock and enter the natural moat before withdrawing his gaze. Even the Huangji family has been alarmed. It seems like something big has happened in the 8 heavens. Gui Shan also withdrew his gaze and muttered to himself in confusion. "Let's go. Aren't you going to bring me to the inn?" Zhuoan said indifferently. Gui Shan glanced at Zhuoan indifferently and nodded before continuing to bring Zhuoan to the inn. In the empty natural moat, an incomparably huge spaceship swept towards the depths of the natural moat at an extremely fast speed. On the deck of the spaceship, Huang Lin stood at the bow with his hands behind his back. His gaze was solemn and there was a faint anger surging in the depths of his eyes. "Master Huang Lin, is Master Yuan Hui really dead?" Fu Qi, the palace master of Impermanence Palace, carefully stood behind Huang Lin and asked tentatively. Huang Lin clenched his fist and said coldly, "You guessed right. Yuan Hui's life flame has been extinguished. Not only him, but that wastrel Huang Ziyi is also dead. Even the guards that Huang Ziyi brought with him have all been annihilated." Fu Qi revealed a look of horror and said, "How is this possible? Grandmaster Yuan Hui is an eternal level array Dao God Master. Even in the host domain or even the Xian Mi heavenly domain, only the true pinnacle powerhouses can kill him. It is impossible for the 8 heavens to have such a powerhouse." Huang Lin snorted and said, "But Yuan Hui was killed just like that. There must be some expert hiding in the 8 heavens who doesn't know what's good for him. How dare he kill someone from my Huangji family? Even if you're a third step Dao validation expert, you won't be able to bear the consequences." Fu Qi suddenly knelt on one knee and said sincerely, "Master Huang Lin, my son also died in the 8 heavens. I heard that the Huangji family has a treasure that can trace back time and space and can track down the murderer. I hope that Master Huang Lin can help my son track down the murderer." Huang Lin looked at Fu Qi coldly. He knew what Fu Qi was planning when he saw Fu Qi following him. Fu Qi, using the Sun Moon Demon Mirror, consumes a lot of essence energy. Even the Great Master can't use it too many times. "If you really want to find the murderer, you have to pay a sufficient price," said Huang Lin. Fu Qi's eyes flickered as if he had made up his mind. "Lord Huang Lin, this lowly one has discovered a special class Heavenly Law Origin Crystal Mine. The mine is extremely vast, and this lowly one wishes to use this opportunity to offer the special class Heavenly Law Origin Crystal Mine. I hope Lord Huang Lin can put in a good word for me." Huang Lin's eyes lit up the moment he heard about the special class Heavenly Dao Origin Crystal Vein. A special class Heavenly Dao Origin Crystal Vein was extremely rare even in the Xian Mi Heavenly region. Fu Qi was really lucky to have found it. Chapter 27:12. Inside the Inn. "Alright, if what you said is true, I believe the first master will be willing to use the Sun Moon Demon Mirror for you. However, to use the Sun Moon Demon Mirror to go back to the past, you need to collect the person's aura after they died. When we return to the 8 heavens, you will collect the young palace master's aura, and I will collect Yuan Hui's aura." Huang Lin reminded carefully, pointing out the importance of this matter. Fu Qi naturally nodded, not daring to be careless about this matter. If I find out who the murderer is, my Huangji clan will drag that person out no matter where we go, peel off his skin, pull out his tendons, and burn his soul in flames for countless years to let him experience the feeling of living a life worse than death. Huang Lin's gaze landed on the other side of the heavenly chasm, in the direction of the 8 heavens. His gaze was cold as he thought to himself. Zhuowen looked at the slightly dilapidated inn in front of him and frowned slightly. On the way here, Gui Shan had been praising this inn for how good it was. Now that he was in front of him, it was in such a dilapidated state. In front of the inn, there was a withered yellow bamboo pole. On top of the bamboo pole hung a banner made of linen, with the words "Impermanence of the World" written on it. Brother Zhuo, let's go in. This inn is considered a good one in this area. After Gui Shan brought Zhuowen to this inn, his warm attitude took a 180-degree turn. Now, the warmth was long gone, replaced by coldness and indifference. Zhuowen did not mind. He followed Gui Shan into the inn. It had to be said that this inn was really dilapidated. The ground was actually muddy, and there were piles of junk. In addition to the small space inside, the overall experience of this inn was much worse. There were only a few cultivators sitting on the dirty tables and chairs that were casually placed in the hall. Moreover, these cultivators' cultivation levels were very low. Zhuowen discovered that most of them were cultivators who had yet to prove their Dao. In the Xianmi heavenly region, this was the lowest level of existence. After all, the Xianmi heavenly region was different from the 8 heavens. Void Sky 9 steps was simply trash here. Anyone could kill them on the streets. Looking at the situation inside, Zhuowen somewhat understood. This inn was the worst in this area, and it should be the cheapest. Otherwise, how could these cultivators who had yet to prove their Dao have the money to stay here? At the front of the counter, a voluptuous woman in a low-cut short skirt leaned. Her right hand holding a long smoking pipe, leisurely. Noticing Gui Shan's arrival, the charming young woman cast him a sidelong glance and casually asked, "Gui Shan, is there another guest coming to stay?" Gui Shan chuckled and glanced at the voluptuous woman's proud place. He pointed at Zhuowen behind him and said, "Give this little brother the best room. I remember that the best room you have here should cost 10 high-grade heavenly Dao origin crystals a night, right?" As soon as Gui Shan said this, the hand holding the pipe in the voluptuous young woman's hand trembled as a look of surprise flashed across her beautiful eyes. However, she quickly regained her composure and glanced at the white-clothed young man behind Gui Shan before saying with a charming smile, "Brother Gui Shan is right. Our best rooms are indeed 10 high-grade heavenly law origin crystals per night. This little brother obviously comes from a prestigious family, so you must be staying in our best rooms, right?" The voice at the counter was not loud, but it was not soft either. The other cultivators sitting in the hall naturally heard this conversation. These cultivators all secretly shook their heads. Their gazes towards Zhuowen were filled with pity, but none of them said anything. Instead, they quickly left the hall. Zhuowen naturally noticed this strange scene. The sneer on his face deepened as he indifferently said, "I'm not a particular person. The cheapest room is fine." Gui Shan and the young woman were stunned. They did not expect this brat to disagree with them. The young woman reacted very quickly. She smiled and said, "Little brother, I'm really sorry. All the rooms in our inn are full. Only the best room is still empty." Zhuowen leisurely glanced at the deserted hall and calmly said, "In that case, I'll stay in the best room for 3 nights. Here are 30 high-grade heavenly Dao origin crystals." Zhuowen very generously took out 30 high-grade heavenly Dao origin crystals and placed them on the counter, stunning the young woman and Gui Shan. In particular, Gui Shan. He had only been probing to see how many high-grade heavenly Dao origin crystals this brat had on him. Originally, he had thought that this brat would only have a dozen or so high-grade heavenly Dao origin crystals at most. But now, it seemed that he had greatly underestimated this brat. From the fact that this brat had casually taken out 30 high-grade heavenly Dao origin crystals, it was clear that this brat had at least 3 digits of high-grade heavenly Dao origin crystals on him. Thinking of this, Gui Shan's heart burned even hotter. He knew that this young man was a fat sheep. The young woman was seeing stars. This was definitely the highest number of high-grade heavenly Tao origin crystals she had ever seen in her life. Her gaze towards Zhuowen had also changed. If it had only been disdain at the beginning, the young woman's eyes were now burning with passion. This young man before her was basically a moving treasury. Zhuowen quietly stood where he was. He was waiting for these two to make a move. Once they made a move, Zhuowen would immediately kill them. However, Gui Shan and the young woman suppressed the greed in their hearts. The young woman even smiled as she personally led Zhuowen to the best guest room. Lady Boss, I heard from Brother Gui Shan that you have first-rate cartography skills. Can you sell me a complete map of the Xian Mi heavenly domain? After the young woman led Zhuowen to an extremely ordinary guest room, Zhuowen did not mind. Instead, he asked the young woman about the map. The young woman revealed an enchanting smile and said, "Young master, you have found the right person. In terms of cartography skills, I am indeed the best in this area. However, I do not have a complete map of the Xian Mi heavenly domain. I only have a map of the host domain." Zhuowen frowned slightly and said, "Didn't you say that your cartography skills are first-rate? Why can you only create a map of the host domain and not the other domains of the Xian Mi heavenly domain? Can this be considered first-rate?" The young woman was a little embarrassed and explained, "Young master, don't you know? As the host domain, it is common knowledge that we have a map of the host domain. However, the maps of the other domains are usually priceless. They are basically in the hands of the Tao Palace level factions. This is because without the permission of the Tao Palace level factions, it is very difficult to leave and cross domains." You mean that the complete map of the Xian Mi heavenly domain is basically in the hands of the Tao Palace level factions? Zhuowen was a little surprised. He did not expect the map of the Xian Mi heavenly domain to have restrictions. It was really strange. You can say that. After all, the relationships between the various domains are not very good. The Tao Palace level factions do this to prevent spies from entering the domains and causing chaos. Usually, the connection between Tao domains is usually sealed. Only when a major event occurs will the connection between the various Tao domains be opened. For example, the Tao domain tournament that is held once every 10,000 years is a major event for the various Tao domains to showcase their respective geniuses. The seal between the various Tao domains will be opened. Chapter 27:13. Fat Sheep. Thank you, Lady Boss. Since you have a map of the host region, can you sell it to me? Zhuowen didn't explain anything to the young woman and went straight to the point. He wanted to buy the map of the host region from the young woman. The young woman smiled. She had already guessed that Zhuowen wanted to buy the host region, which was why she was so enthusiastic before. Especially when she found out that Zhuowen was a fool with a lot of money, the young woman became even more attentive. The young woman's slender fingers gently stroked the necklace in front of her chest. Her movements were very seductive. Then, a jade slip appeared in the young woman's hand. The jade slip was crystal clear and exquisitely made. It made people's eyes light up. Zhuowen looked at the jade slip in surprise. In his opinion, the map the young woman took out shouldn't be much. Although Zhuowen didn't lack crystal stones, if the map the young woman took out didn't satisfy him, he wouldn't buy it without permission. After all, he wasn't a real fool. "Let me take a look at this map first, then I'll decide whether to buy it or not," Zhuowen said with a smile. The young woman didn't care and handed the jade slip to Zhuowen. She wasn't worried that Zhuowen would take it away. Zhuowen casually scanned it with his divine sense and found that the map drawn in the jade slip was indeed very exquisite. The rough geography of the host region was basically drawn in it. Zhuowen found that the Eastern Path region was very large and there were tens of thousands of Daoist-level forces. Each Daoist-level force occupied a large area and had their own mountain gate and heavenly Dao dragon vein. They managed countless cultivators and plain worlds. The number of Daoist-level forces was much smaller. In the Eastern Path region, there were only 3 digits of Daoist-level forces. The territory controlled by Daoist-level forces was even larger. Moreover, each Daoist-level force had many Daoist-level forces attached to it. From the map, Zhuowen found that the Impermanence Palace was one of the Daoist-level forces attached to the Huangji family. It was no wonder that when the people from the Huangji aristocratic family came to the pier, the palace master of the Impermanence Palace was so servile and fawning. Above the Dao Palace level, there was a truly hegemonic force, a Dao Palace level force. There were only 5 recognized Dao Palace factions in the entire host region. The map also mentioned that there were some hidden Dao Palace factions in the host region. Of course, whether or not there were hidden Dao Palace factions was only a guess. After all, other than the 5 publicly recognized Dao Palace factions, the other hidden Dao Palace factions rarely moved about in the outside world. These 5 publicly recognized Dao Palace forces were Scarlet Mountain Villa, Fallen Star Mountain Villa, Void Palace, Sun Chasing Temple, and 10 Extreme Yin Corpse Sect. Each of these 5 forces was enough to cause a commotion in the host region. They were deeply rooted and influenced the development of the host region. Zhuowen secretly memorized the names of the 5 Dao Palaces before putting away the jade slip. He looked at the young woman and said, "This map of yours is pretty good. What's the price?" The smile on the young woman's face grew even wider. She first bragged about the many precious materials she had used to make this map, as well as the effort she had put into it. In any case, she was just bragging. Zhuowen sneered inwardly. The map was indeed quite exquisite, but it wasn't as exaggerated as the young woman had made it out to be. He knew that the young woman had said this because she wanted to ask for a sky-high price. However, he didn't care. He had a lot of crystals on him, so casually taking out a few hundred high-grade Heavenly Law origin crystals was nothing to him. Of course, he had long seen that the young woman and Wind-Gathering Mountain were up to no good. He planned to continue flaunting his wealth in front of these 2 people. He wanted to see if they really dared to make a move on him. In the end, the young woman finally gave a price. "I see that you and I hit it off quite well. Although I paid a huge price to make this map, I'll give you a discount. 500 high-grade Heavenly Law origin crystals." The young woman's heart thumped wildly when she gave this price. This price far exceeded the price of the map itself. She had never even accepted so many high-grade Heavenly Law origin crystals before. Although she felt that this young man was foolish and rich, she also knew that the price she gave was far too high. She didn't think that this young man could afford it. Of course, if the young man couldn't, the young woman would naturally continue to lower the price. In any case, she was actually just testing how many high-grade Heavenly Law origin crystals Zhuowen had on him. "Oh, 500 high-grade Heavenly Law origin crystals really aren't expensive." Zhuowen smiled. With a wave of his sleeve, he very naturally took out 500 high-grade Heavenly Law origin crystals. The young woman couldn't help but feel a little dizzy as she stared at the white crystals before her. The young woman was truly shocked. She never thought that the young man would really take out 500 high-grade Heavenly Law origin crystals. Moreover, from the looks of it, he didn't seem to care at all. Didn't this mean that the young man had far more high-grade Heavenly Law origin crystals on him than 500? Thinking of this, the young woman couldn't help but feel a fire burning in her heart. She looked at Zhuowen with a much more fervent gaze. After putting away the 500 high-grade Heavenly Law origin crystals, the young woman casually chatted with Zhuowen for a while longer before bidding farewell and leaving. Zhuowen closed the door casually, and his enormous spiritual sense did indeed sweep out silently, following the young woman and landing in the hall below. Zhuowen's divine sense was extremely powerful, far more powerful than that of the young woman and Gui Shan. If Zhuowen deliberately concealed his divine sense, the 2 of them wouldn't have been able to detect that Zhuowen's divine sense had already followed the young woman. The young woman walked down the stairs. Gui Shan was still in the hall, casually sitting at a table. Seeing the young woman come down, he hurriedly stepped forward and asked, "Xiaohe, how was it? How many crystals did this boy take out to buy the map?" The young woman smiled proudly and opened her right palm. Gui Shan took a look and said in surprise, 50 high-grade Heavenly Law origin crystals? This boy is really not ordinary. He's willing to spend so much on a map. The young woman smiled slyly and said, "You idiot, it's not 50, it's 500. This boy's wealth is probably far greater than you and I guessed. It looks like a fat sheep has come this time." 500. Gui Shan was also shocked. Chapter 27:14. Deception. He really is a fat sheep. This fellow is only the heavenly Tao master, yet he actually has so many high-grade heavenly Tao origin crystals. Could it be that the faction behind him is very powerful? The young woman asked worriedly. Gui Shan also revealed a fearful expression, but he quickly advised, "Don't worry, this kid is all alone, and from the looks of it, he doesn't know anything about the Impermanence Pier. He's clearly not a cultivator from Impermanence Palace. As long as we do things cleanly and don't leave any traces, so what if this kid has a powerful background? Dead men tell no tales, so how can they trace it back to us? Moreover, my big brother is now a Chaos Yuan master and has entered the ranks of Impermanence Palace's core disciples. At the same time, he has a good relationship with Impermanence Palace's second young master. My big brother can easily suppress this matter." When she heard Gui Shan mention his big brother, the young woman's beautiful eyes rippled with a strange light. The young woman's cultivation was the same as Gui Shan's, Dao Yuan master, but the difference was that she had broken through on her own, while Gui Shan's talent was not strong and he had relied on resources. Furthermore, with Gui Shan's talent, he did not have the qualifications to become the Impermanence Pier's manager, but because of his big brother's words, he smoothly became the Impermanence Pier's manager. It was clear to see just how influential Gui Shan's big brother was in Impermanence Palace. The reason the young woman was so fawning over Gui Shan was partly because of Gui Shan's big brother's deterrence. Otherwise, how could the young woman be so courteous to Gui Shan? After all, in terms of strength, the young woman could kill Gui Shan in a few moves, but she did not dare, so she could only curry favor with him. If Big Brother Gui Yuan is above us, we really have nothing to fear. Big Brother Gui Shan, when do you plan to act? The young woman looked at Gui Shan with her beautiful eyes and asked coquettishly. Gui Shan rubbed himself against the young woman's body, causing the young woman to blush before coldly laughing. "Let's do it tomorrow, but we can't do it near the docks. We'll lure him to the wasteland in the west and kill him without anyone knowing." The young woman nodded in agreement. At the same time, she praised Gui Shan, causing him to squint his eyes in pleasure. Zhuowen sat cross-legged on the bed. His spiritual awareness was indeed lingering around the man and woman downstairs who were scheming something. A disdainful smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. These two people were really planning to target Zhuowen. However, Zhuowen didn't care about this at all. However, Zhuowen was a little surprised that Gui Shan actually had a big brother. This big brother was a core disciple of Impermanence Palace. It seemed like this fella had some connections. The young woman and Wind-Gathering Mountain's words were somewhat unsightly, so Zhuowen withdrew his divine sense and began to carefully study the map that the young woman had given him. Although this young woman had the heart of a snake and scorpion, the map she drew could not be faked. The markings on the map were also quite detailed. Zhuowen quickly found the location of Purple Red House on the map. He had just arrived in Xianmi Heavenly Domain, so the only things he knew about Purple Red House were its fire plume and steel plume. Moreover, the two of them had invited Zhuowen to visit their forces. This time, he naturally wanted to visit Purple Red House. Of course, Zhuowen mainly wanted to learn more about Xianmi Heavenly Domain from Fire Plume and See Tongchime while he was at it. The map of the host territory was very large. Zhuowen was so engrossed in it that he forgot to eat and sleep. Before he knew it, a day had passed. It wasn't until there was a knock on the door that Zhuowen recovered. He put away the jade slip and opened the door to see the young woman standing outside with a smile. "Lady boss, what's the matter?" Zhuowen asked lightly. The young woman smiled charmingly and said, "Young lord, there is a tribe in the west that is holding a gathering. It is said that many rare treasures will appear at this gathering. It is a rare opportunity. Would young lord be willing to go with little he? Oh, will there be second step Dao confirming divine medicines?" Zhuowen asked curiously. The young woman's smile stiffened. After cursing Zhuoan in her heart for being so careless, she still smiled and said, I heard that second-step Dao confirming divine medicines might appear. There will even be many second-step Dao confirming powerhouses there. Maybe you can trade for the things you need from those powerhouses? Zhuoan showed an interested look and said, in that case, I will have to trouble Lady Boss. The young woman smiled and said, young lord, don't call me Lady Boss. When you call me Lady Boss, it makes me sound old. Just call me Big Sister He. Then I will have to trouble Big Sister He. Zhuoan nodded. After walking out of the inn, Zhuoan found that the sky outside was already dark. The young woman held a lantern in her right hand and beckoned Zhuoan to go to the west. The environment of the Xian-Mi heavenly domain was very similar to that of Earth. They both had day and night, but the day and night in the Xian-Mi heavenly domain were very long. One day was equivalent to 10 days on Earth. Of course, for cultivators, 1 day and 10 days were no different. After all, there was no time in cultivation. For cultivators, the most important thing was to make breakthroughs. As long as they kept making breakthroughs, their lifespan would increase by several times. Moreover, it was unknown whether the laws of the Xian-Mi heavenly domain were much stronger than those of the 8 major heavenly domains, but in the Xian-Mi heavenly domain at night, there was a bone-chilling coldness. This coldness reminded Zhuoan of the time when he was still a mortal, the feeling of traveling at night on Earth. On the way, the young woman chatted with Zhuoan casually at first, but as they went deeper and deeper, the young woman stopped talking and just silently led the way. Zhuoan silently followed behind the young woman and found that the surrounding environment was getting more and more remote. The coldness of the night was also getting worse and worse. It invaded the body and made people tremble. Finally, the two of them came to an incomparably dark small bamboo forest, and the young woman stopped in front of them. Zhuoan also stopped and pretended to be puzzled. Sister He, how can there be a market here? It's so remote. Did you bring us to the wrong place? Hehe, little brother, I have to say, you're really simple. How did a simple cultivator like you survive until now? The young woman held the lantern and slowly turned around. Her beautiful eyes were filled with cold light as she stared coldly at Zhuoan. Sister He, I don't understand what you're saying. Zhuoan still pretended to be confused. Haha, what Xiao He means is, if you don't want to die, hand over the ring on your body. Perhaps we'll be merciful and let you live. A cold voice came from behind Zhuoan. Then Zhuoan turned around and looked at the skinny man behind him in surprise. Guishan? You're lying to me. Are you planning to rob me? Zhuoan came to a sudden realization. Guishan looked at the look of surprise on Zhuoan's face and felt extremely satisfied in his heart. He proudly said, You're right, we shouldn't show off our wealth. Who told you to be such an idiot and let us see so many crystal stones? If you know what's good for you, hurry up and hand over the ring. As Guishan spoke, the killing intent in his eyes was no longer concealed. Chapter 27:15. Must kill. Will you really let me live if I hand over the ring? Zhuoan seemed to be afraid. Of course, Guishan said proudly. Then I'll give you the ring. Zhuoan took off the ring on his finger without hesitation and tossed it to Guishan. Guishan was stunned, and then he put the ring away and roared with laughter. His laughter was filled with disdain as he said, What a spineless fellow. You've surrendered so quickly. In order to reward you, I've decided to take your life. Guishan wasn't in a hurry to check the ring. Instead, he kicked off the ground with his right foot and charged at Zhuoan like a ferocious tiger. He had unknowingly pulled out a large blade that glowed with a cold light, and he aimed it at Zhuoan's forehead. You're not keeping your word. Zhuoan's expression changed drastically. Guishan revealed a look of disdain and said, Keeping my word? There's no such thing in my dictionary. Only an idiot like you would believe my words. On the other side, the young woman exhaled a cloud of smoke as she looked at Zhuoan's back. She secretly shook her head. She felt that this young man was far too naive, and even she couldn't bear to continue watching. This kind of fellow will die sooner or later. He'll suffer less pain if he dies earlier, the young woman muttered to herself. Clang. Gui Shan's blade slashed at Zhuowen's forehead, and then the sound of metal clashing resounded. Gui Shan watched in shock as his blade didn't cut through Zhuowen's forehead. Instead, it was repelled by Zhuowen's forehead. Gui Shan grunted as he stared at this scene in disbelief. He had used all his strength in that attack, and its power was extraordinary. Even if Daoyuan Master stood there and allowed himself to be struck, he would still die, let alone a mere heavenly Dao Master. However, this young man before him didn't move at all. His blade was actually unharmed when it struck the young man's forehead. Instead, it was Gui Shan who was pushed back by the repelling force, and he had already suffered some internal injuries. Gui Shan was stunned. Not far away, the young woman who was puffing out smoke was also stunned. They felt that this scene was too strange. After all, Gui Shan was a Daoyuan master. Although he was a mediocre person who relied on resources, the power of his full-powered saber was not ordinary. Even if she stood in place and let Gui Shan slash her, she would still be severely injured. However, this young man, who was merely the heavenly Dao master, seemed to be completely unharmed while Gui Shan had been reduced to such a sorry state by the backlash. Gui Shan refused to give up and picked up his large saber again. He once again charged towards Zhuowen, unleashing 10 or so saber images in the blink of an eye. They looked incredibly powerful and dazzling. Unfortunately, every slash was like a tickle to Zhuowen, unable to cause even the slightest bit of damage. Gui Shan was terrified. He finally realized that something was amiss. This young man's physical body was far too terrifying. His weapon was a primordial Dao-grade divine artifact, yet it couldn't even leave a scratch on this young man's body. Zhuowen grinned at Gui Shan and said, "Have you slashed enough?" Gui Shan was so frightened that he sat on the ground. He stared at Zhuowen, his soul almost leaving his body. This young man was simply pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. He was obviously so powerful, yet he pretended to be afraid. The young woman also realized that something was wrong. She was extremely decisive. She stomped her foot and fled into the depths of the bamboo forest. She knew that she had hit a wall this time. This young man, who seemed to be a heavenly Dao master, was actually a hidden expert. "Do you think you can escape?" Zhuowen looked at the young woman who had decisively fled and sneered. His right hand made a grabbing motion in the air. A terrifying energy condensed into an invisible hand and instantly rushed into the depths of the bamboo forest. With a scream, the young woman was grabbed by the invisible hand and violently thrown in front of Zhuowen. She spat out a mouthful of blood and was so severely injured that she couldn't get up. Zhuowen didn't use the power of the Pangu sacred body just now. He used the power of the heavenly Dao master. It had to be said that Zhuowen's power as a heavenly Dao master was beyond his imagination. Just the power of that move alone was enough to match the power of an ordinary Hunyuan master. Gui Shan was scared out of his wits. He also wanted to escape. Unfortunately, Zhuowen's casual slap immediately left Gui Shan half dead. He was thrown to the side of the young woman by Zhuowen. "Don't kill me. I am Gui Yuan's younger brother. My elder brother, Gui Yuan, is a core disciple of Anika Palace. If you kill me, you won't be able to bear the consequences," Gui Shan hurriedly said. Unfortunately, as soon as Gui Shan finished speaking, Zhuowen stepped on his head and took back both his and the young woman's rings. "I even killed Prince Anika. Why would I care about a small fry like you?" Zhuowen sneered. With a flick of his right hand, a terrifying energy turned into a spiral and sank into Gui Shan's glabella. When Gui Shan heard that Prince Anika was killed by Zhuowen, he was already stunned. He didn't even notice Zhuowen's killing move and was killed in one blow. The young woman trembled. She was filled with regret. If she knew that the young man in front of her was so terrifying, she wouldn't have tried to kill him. Especially when he admitted that he was the one who killed Prince Anika. This made the young woman even more frightened. Everyone in the territory of Anika Palace knew about Prince Anika's death. Even the palace master of Anika Palace, Fu Qi, had begun to choose a new successor. Of course, in order to find the real murderer, Fu Qi had even alerted the Huangji family. This kind of sensational matter had already caused a huge uproar. Many people were guessing who had the audacity to kill Prince Anika. The young woman didn't expect that the murderer that everyone was talking about was now in front of her. Moreover, she was planning to rob such a ruthless person. "You can come with me." Zhuoan waved his sleeve and a flame swept out, enveloping the young woman and Gui Shan. Soon, the two of them were turned into ashes. After dealing with the two of them, Zhuoan left the place. He planned to leave the territory of Anika Palace and head to the Purple Red Chamber. The territory of the Purple Red Chamber was controlled by another Dao Palace. This faction was called the Thunder God's Garden. It was said that it was a powerful faction that controlled the power of divine lightning. Moreover, the Thunder God's Garden was very far from the Huangji family. If Zhuoan wanted to go to the Thunder God's Garden, he would have to use a teleportation array. The teleportation array between Dao Palaces was controlled by Dao Palaces. Therefore, if Zhuoan wanted to go to the Thunder God's Garden, he would have to enter the capital of the Huangji family. Only the Huangji family had such an ancient teleportation array. Moreover, it was said that the cost was not cheap. In the core disciples' room of Anika Palace, a man with a long sword on his back suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes were bloodshot as he spat out a mouthful of blood. "Who killed my brother Gui Shan? A debt of blood must be paid with blood." The man with the long sword on his back suddenly stood up. A terrifying sword energy swept out like a storm and the place he was in was turned into ruins. The man with the long sword on his back was one of the core disciples of Anika Palace, Gui Yuan. He was also Gui Shan's elder brother. He and Gui Shan had depended on each other for survival since they were young. There was a faint connection between their bloodlines. Moreover, the two of them had a very good relationship. When Gui Shan was killed, Gui Yuan felt a heartache. He knew that Gui Yuan must have been killed. Otherwise, he wouldn't have felt this way. Chapter 27:16. 3-star peak Gui Yuan, are you crazy? How could you cause such a big commotion? You even destroyed a disciples' cave residence. A yellow-robed young man stood out from the crowd of disciples who had gathered. He frowned slightly as he looked at the damage caused by Gui Yuan and spoke with slight displeasure. The aura of this young man in a yellow shirt was extremely strong, even stronger than Gui Yuan's. When the young man in a yellow shirt spoke, the surrounding people lowered their voices and looked at the young man in a yellow shirt with a mixture of fear and respect. Even Ping Han is alarmed. Gui Yuan caused a big commotion. Although Ping Han is the most talented and powerful core disciple of Impermanence Palace, Gui Yuan is a rising star and a dark horse with endless potential. Ping Han still values Gui Yuan. That's right. Ping Han is the strongest disciple of Impermanence Palace. Coupled with the fall of Impermanence Palace, the successor of Impermanence Palace is Ping Han. Gui Yuan's talent is also one of the best. In the future, he will definitely become a core member of Impermanence Palace. Ping Han is trying to win Gui Yuan over to pave the way for him to succeed Impermanence Palace in the future. It seems that Ping Han is here to help Gui Yuan suppress this storm. After all, a core disciple's cave residence was personally approved by the palace master. Gui Yuan will inevitably be punished for his reckless actions. However, with Ping Han's help, Gui Yuan will be able to avoid this punishment. The surrounding people discussed animatedly as they looked at Gui Yuan with envy and jealousy. As the number one core disciple, Ping Han's popularity and prestige were very high among the core disciples. For Gui Yuan to be able to receive special treatment from Ping Han, it was something worthy of envy for the other core disciples. Gui Yuan's eyes were cold, but his heart was filled with sadness and anger. Gui Yuan cupped his hands towards Ping Han and said in a low voice, "Senior brother Ping Han, my younger brother Gui Shan was killed. I must take revenge. Otherwise, it will have a great impact on my breakthrough to the second step of Dao validation." Ping Han frowned slightly. He had heard of Gui Yuan's younger brother Gui Shan. He knew that Gui Shan's talent was very poor. His cultivation base had been forcefully raised by the precious divine pills that Gui Yuan had given him. His strength was much weaker than an ordinary Dao origin master. He might only be slightly stronger than the heavenly Dao master. In Ping Han's eyes, Gui Shan was a complete and utter trash. He did not place Gui Shan in his eyes. However, he had no choice but to pay attention to a genius like Gui Yuan. Although he did not like Gui Shan, he was still Gui Yuan's younger brother. Now that Gui Shan was dead, if he did not express his gratitude, Gui Yuan's heart would probably turn cold. Gui Shan is still a disciple of our Impermanence Palace. Killing a disciple of our Impermanence Palace is the same as slapping our face and going against us. Ping Han's gaze was calm. He looked at Gui Yuan and said, Gui Yuan, since Gui Shan is your younger brother, I will go with you to investigate this matter. Gui Yuan's eyes revealed joy, and he hurriedly bowed and said, Many thanks, senior apprentice brother Ping Han. Ping Han waved his hand and said, We're all fellow apprentices. It's only right that we help each other. The surrounding core disciples all revealed looks of envy and jealousy. They felt that Ping Han was giving Gui Yuan too special treatment. Zhuowen sat cross-legged on the space-time roulette and rushed towards the Huangji clan's capital city. Because he had obtained a map of the entire host domain, Zhuowen clearly knew the specific direction of the Huangji clan. It had to be said that the Xian Mi heavenly region was extremely vast. Just the distance between the Impermanence Palace and the Huangji clan, Zhuowen estimated that it would take a month. One had to know that the spacetime roulette speed had increased greatly after fusing with the blue light from the spacetime temple. According to Zhuowen's estimation, the spacetime roulette speed was definitely faster than some second-step Dao confirming experts. One had to know that Kong Shi was an eternal overlord. Even Kong Shi's speed was far inferior to the spacetime roulette. It could be seen how terrifying the speed of the evolved spacetime roulette was. With the spacetime roulette's current speed, it would take a month to travel from the Impermanence Palace to the Huangji clan's capital city. It could be seen how vast the two regions were. The distance between the Impermanence Palace and the Huangji clan's capital city was simply insignificant compared to the vast territory of the host domain. It was not worth mentioning. After Zhuowen told Xiao He the route, he became a hands-off shopkeeper. Xiao He had already come out of seclusion a few days ago. This guy's progress was very fast. Even Zhuowen felt a little dumbfounded because this guy had actually advanced to the primordial grade divine tool. On the day that Xiao He came out of seclusion, he showed off in front of Zhuowen and was very proud of himself. Unfortunately, Zhuowen sent this guy flying with a slap. This made Xiao He feel the power of the Pangu sacred body. Since that day, Xiao He no longer dared to show off in front of Zhuowen because once he showed off, he would be mercilessly slapped in the face by Zhuowen. Not only had Xiao He made great progress, but Xiao He had also trained the Blood Immortal Sword and the Death Sacrifice Sword very well. Both of them had advanced to the primordial grade divine tool. This showed how abundant the resources Zhuowen had obtained in the spacetime temple. Zhuowen was in seclusion on the spacetime roulette. He planned to continue absorbing the special class Heavenly Path Origin crystals during this month. He wanted to use this to advance his Pangu sacred body to the peak of the 3-star realm. Previously, because his original body had caused too much of a commotion by absorbing the special class Heavenly Path Origin crystals, his doppelganger was forced to stop absorbing the special class Heavenly Path Origin crystals and only reached the 3-star realm. Now that his original body had successfully broken through to the Heavenly Pathmaster and there were many special class Heavenly Path Origin crystals in the Great World, Zhuowen naturally would not waste such an opportunity to break through. Time flew, and a month passed quickly. Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes. His expression was calm, but the aura in his body swept out like a storm. Creak, creak. Zhuowen slowly stood up, and then he found that the entire spacetime roulette was trembling violently. It was as if it could not withstand his movements and would fall at any time. Xiao He cursed and hurriedly controlled the spacetime roulette. Only then did he manage to control the spacetime roulette so that it would not sway and fly normally. Boy, your Pangu sacred body has broken through again? After Xiao He controlled the spacetime roulette, he diverted his attention to Zhuowen and asked in surprise. Zhuowen smiled and said, Yes, I was lucky to break through to the peak of the 3-star realm. What a freak. This Pangu sacred body is too terrifying. Just now, you just stood up, and the space-time roulette seemed to be unable to withstand your weight and was about to fall. Fortunately, I brilliantly controlled the space-time roulette. Chapter 27:17. Blocking the way. Zhuowen shook his head. The reason why the space-time roulette had almost gone out of control was that Zhuowen had just broken through and was unable to fully control the power of the 3-star peak Pangu sacred body. The power of the Pangu sacred body was extremely terrifying. After breaking through to the 3-star peak, it was enough to defeat any first-step Dao validation expert. He could even challenge a second-step Dao validation expert. Of course, Zhuowen had already adapted to the power of the 3-star peak Pangu sacred body, so he was able to completely control the power of the Pangu sacred body and prevent it from leaking out. "Kid, we're almost at the capital of the Huangji clan," Xiaohei suddenly said. Zhuowen raised his head and looked into the distance. He saw a gigantic city in the distance. The city was too big. Its surface was overflowing with colors and it was dazzling. It was as if the city was built with countless luxury goods. Zhuowen knew that the reason the city was so dazzling was because there were many formations and restrictions on the surface of the city. It could be said that 50% of the city was formed by formations and restrictions. With Zhuowen's current level of formation Dao, he could tell at a glance that the formations and restrictions on the city were eternal level formations. Moreover, it was not just one formation, but a combination of many formations. It could be said that such a terrifying city was enough to make eternal overlords unable to leave. Zhuowen's gaze turned grave. This Huangji aristocratic family actually controlled such an incomparably terrifying gigantic city, while he, Zhuowen, had killed the heir of Huangji aristocratic family and an existence like Grandmaster Yuan Hui. It could be said that he had formed an irreconcilable feud with the Huangji clan. If the Huangji clan knew that Zhuowen was the murderer and that Zhuowen was now entering the city, he would be courting death. Of course, Zhuowen knew that the Huangji clan did not know that Zhuowen was the real murderer. However, Zhuowen was a little worried. He thought of the expert from the Huangji clan at the impermanence dock. This expert must have gone to the 8 heavens to investigate the cause of death of Huang Ziyi and Master Yuan Hui. Although Zhuowen was very confident that he had completely destroyed the corpse and left no traces behind, the Huangji clan was a Dao Palace-level force after all. It had a deep foundation and was definitely not something an ordinary force could compare to. Perhaps this kind of power might have some kind of inconceivable method to find the murderer, then Zhuowen would be in a bad situation. Although Zhuowen felt that the possibility of this happening was not high, he had an ominous feeling in his heart. The closer he got to the capital city, the faster his heart raced. It was as if it was reminding him to leave as soon as possible. This was a dangerous place. Zhuowen trusted his intuition. After all, at Zhuowen's level of cultivation, he had the instinct to know his destiny. He could foresee the past, the future, and his own fate in advance. Once we enter the capital city, we should leave as soon as possible. Zhuowen made up his mind. However, when he was about 10,000 meters away from the capital city, Zhuowen stopped the space-time roulette. This was because someone was blocking the path of his space-time roulette. What blocked Zhuowen's path was a huge flying divine weapon. This flying divine weapon looked like a lantern and was very large. At the top of the lantern was a large deck. At that moment, 4 figures were standing on the deck. The auras of these 4 figures were very powerful. They were all at the Hunyuan master level. This was especially true for the yellow-robed young man, who was closer to the front. His aura was the strongest, and his cultivation was at least at the peak of the Hunyuan master level. He was very close to the second step Dao validation. Zhuowen stopped the space-time roulette and looked coldly at the 4 people on the deck of the flying divine weapon. He asked indifferently, "Why are the 4 of you blocking my path?" Next to the yellow-robed young man, a young man with a long sword on his back took a step forward. With a flick of his finger, an image condensed above his fingertip. He asked, "Do you know the person in this image?" Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. The image that the young man with a sword had taken out was not unfamiliar to Zhuowen. It was the image of Gui Shan, who he had killed. Moreover, Zhuoan realized that the young man with a sword in front of him was somewhat similar to Gui Shan. It seemed that this person had a close relationship with Gui Shan. Zhuoan said without hesitation, "I don't know him. If you're stopping me just to ask this, you can move aside. Don't block the way." Zhuoan's words were very rude. The four people on the deck all revealed displeased expressions. Even the yellow-clothed young man with the best self-restraint frowned slightly. The young man with a sword was Gui Yuan. At that moment, when he heard Zhuoan's rude words, he was so angry that his whole body trembled. "You want to act shamelessly? Actually, you're the murderer," Gui Yuan said coldly, not hiding the killing intent in his eyes. Zhuoan's gaze was cold as he said, "I say, brother, you're already in the wrong for blocking me. Now, you're indiscriminately slandering me as the murderer. Do you think I'm easy to bully?" Gui Yuan was so angry that he wanted to kill someone. He directly drew his sword, certain that Zhuoan was the murderer. However, he was stopped by the yellow-robed young man. Although Gui Yuan was furious, he was still respectful towards the yellow-robed man. At this moment, the yellow-robed young man stopped him. He also put down the sword in his hand, but his gaze towards Zhuoan was still filled with killing intent. The yellow-robed young man smiled at Zhuoan and said, "Brother, I haven't asked for your name yet. What sect are you from?" Zhuoan looked at the smiling young man in front of him and shrugged, "My name is Zhuoan. I don't belong to any sect. I'm just a rogue cultivator." "I see. My name is Ping Han. These three are my junior brothers, and I'm a disciple of Anika Palace." The yellow-robed young man was still smiling. In fact, when he saw that Zhuoan was just a heavenly pathmaster, he was a little surprised. He even suspected that the young man in front of him had the strength to kill Gui Shan. Although Gui Shan was just a good-for-nothing in the eyes of the yellow-robed young man, he was still a Dao Yuan master. Even if he was much weaker than the average Dao Yuan master, he was still stronger than the heavenly pathmaster. Although it was not impossible for a heavenly pathmaster to kill a Dao Yuan master, those were geniuses from sects and clans. It was even said that the true monsters could kill people who were an entire realm above them. However, such geniuses were too rare. Basically, only Dao Palace level forces had such geniuses. Of course, powerful Dao Palace level forces also had such geniuses. Such geniuses were enough to be called peerless monsters. Actually, we don't want to casually suspect people, but I heard that before Gui Shan died, you seemed to be the last person he came into contact with. However, you denied knowing Gui Shan. Sir, shouldn't you give us an explanation as to why you would lie? You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.